August 8th, 2024 Planning Commission hearing. I will call the hearing to order at 1:02 p.m. Ms. Johnson, can we have a roll call vote?
Thank you, Chair Bauke. I'll take roll call. Chair Bauke.
Here.
Vice Chair Wardlow.
Here.
Commissioner Barnwell.
Here.
Commissioner Boss.
Present.
Commissioner DeLuccio.
Here.
Commissioner Lodge.
Here.
Commissioner Wiscombe.
Here.
We have a quorum. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to preliminary matters. First is a request for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or additions of ex-agenda items. Do we have any of those, Ms.? Well, bye. Different person.
Mr. Chair, thank you. We have none.
Okay. Next is announcements or appeals. Do we have any of those?
Also none.
Okay, that brings us to review, consideration, and actions of the following draft Planning Commission minutes and resolutions. We have two sets of minutes, the July 11th and July 18th, and we have a commission resolution number 010-24 for 504 State Street. Does any of my fellow commissioners have comments or corrections to those minutes or comments on the resolution? I have Lucille. Boss.
Chair Bauke, I will need to recuse myself from the July 11th minutes and the resolution, so if possible, if we can take those in separate motions, I'd appreciate that.
Yes, let's do that. So if anybody would like to make two motions, let's start with the July 11th commission meeting.
I'll make a motion for July 11th
Okay,
meeting minutes for approval.
do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, first and second, let's have a roll call vote on that.
Thank you, Chair Bauke. I'll take roll call vote. Commissioner Boss.
Abstention.
Commissioner DeLuccio.
Yes.
Commissioner Lodge.
Yes.
Commissioner Barnwell.
Yes.
Commissioner Wiscombe.
Yes.
Vice Chair Wardlow.
Abstain.
Chair Bauke.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, moving on to the other the resolution and the minutes. Who would like to make a motion?
I'll move the resolution in minutes.
Was it? Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Thank you, Chair Bauke. I'll take roll call vote. Commissioner DeLuccio.
Yes.
Commissioner Lodge.
Yes.
Commissioner Barnwell.
Yes.
Commissioner Wiscombe.
Yes.
Commissioner Boss.
Yes.
Vice Chair Wardlow.
Abstain.
Chair Bauke.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, moving on. Next is public comments pertaining to items not on this agenda. Do we have any speaker slips for general public comment?
Thank you, Chair Bauke. At this time, I haven't received any speaker slips, and I'm not seeing any movement, so I'll go ahead and move to virtual public comment. If you wish to speak on Zoom at this time, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you. I'm not seeing any hands raised, and we didn't receive any general written correspondence, so I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Bauke.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to our new item, which is the objective design and development standards. The purpose of this hearing is for the Planning Commission to consider a recommendation to the City Council for adoption of the objective design standards and a whole set of related amendments to the municipal code, and also to affirm the categorical exemption for environmental review pursuant to CEQA guidelines, section 15305, minor alterations in land use limitations. Before I start, do we have any commissioners that have any ex parte communication on this that needs to be disclosed? I don't see any, so moving on. We're going to go to a staff presentation. We will have project planner Rosie Dystra for a staff presentation, and I believe Mr. Gullett's going to introduce a number of people first, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Bauke. Good afternoon, Planning Commission. We're very excited to be here. It's a fairly monumentous occasion for us in the Planning Division to be here with this document today, and I just want to introduce our team briefly. We're very fortunate to have Opticos Design working with us on this project. We started this in 2021, and two of the main members of the Opticos team are here. Stefan Pellegrini and Tony Perez are here. We also have some work group members. We have had work group who's worked with us over these years, who's been very engaged and helpful. Dennis Dorden and Dennis Whalen are here. I believe Cass Ensberg will be attending as well, and other members of the work group wrote a letter on behalf of the work group to the Planning Commission on this. This project it implements an important action in the housing element to get objective design standards that streamline the process for developers. They provide predictability and reduce developer cost exposure. So this is something that we care a lot about. We want it to work. We want people to use it. The city staff team on this is led by Rosie Deisty. She'll be doing the presentation. This has been extremely sensitive and tricky project, and we're grateful for all the work she's done on it. Joining her is Dana Falk and Brenda Beltz, who have been great support staff and provided really good technical assistance. Other city staff who are in attendance here, Jessica Grant is here from Transportation Planning, and Erin Markey is here from the Creeks Division. She's a planner in the Creeks Division who can speak to creek standards that are included in this. So the work group and staff are recommending approval of this version of the objective design and development standards. Acknowledging that we want to continue a dialogue with the development community moving forward. This hasn't been tested yet. We do want to keep a close eye on it. We want to commit to the Planning Commission that we'll be back within 2 years to report on this and recommend any amendments that we see are necessary. And with that, I'll conclude and hand it over to Ms. Deisty. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, Chair Bauke, Vice Chair Wardlow, and members of the Commission. So the project before you today has already been mentioned, is the Title 25 Objective Design and Development Standards. I'll be referring to them by the acronym ODDS and the amendments to Title 30. Again, the purpose is to ask for your recommendation to City Council on adoption of the ODDS and the Title 30 zoning ordinance amendments, the CEQA exemption determination, and also the general plan consistency analysis. And that's included as attachment F to your staff report is the general plan consistency analysis. So the format of this presentation is that I'll be giving a little background and why we are doing this project in the first place. Then I'll hand it over to our Opticos team, and they'll be describing the framework for this project and who they are and their approach and intent to supporting the ODDS. Then it'll come back to staff or to me to talk about a guide to using this document, the objective design review process, the Title 30 amendments I'll go over very briefly, and recommendations and next steps. I do want to mention that Opticos team has a flight to catch this afternoon, so they can be here till about 4:30. So if you have questions specific for them, it'd be good to get those done early on. So I'll start with some background, as I mentioned. So objective standards are standards that involve no personal or subjective judgment by a public official. They're uniformly verifiable by reference to an external source, and they could need to be known by both the applicant and staff. The areas of the city that are considered in this project are where we have multi-unit zones or 2 or more units are allowed, and commercial zones that allow residential use. So what we're not considering under this project is single unit zones, accessory dwelling units, mobile home parks, or projects that need a modification. They would need to go through discretionary design review. The goals of this ODDS were included in page 2 of your staff report, but in general, they are proposed to increase predictability in the process, promote a livable city, respect the context of the existing built and natural environment using designs that sort of reflect our high quality architecture, and create a visual language. So that's by using graphics, photos, and tables to have a catalog of agreed upon designs available. As Mr. Gullett mentioned, it's been a long time coming on this project. It started in 2021. We were awarded a $300,000 grant from the State Department of Housing and Community Development to work on this project. We've had a couple of milestones of existing conditions report that Opticos prepared for us, and admin and public draft last year, and now this draft proposed for adoption. We've had work group meetings throughout the process, community engagement as well, started early on with a survey and then a second survey later on. I'll go into a little more detail on that. And then a series of public hearings, mostly before the Architectural Board of Review and Historic Landmarks Commission, although we came to your commission last July with an overview of this document as well. The work group has been very instrumental in the success and where we are today. They are made up of the members of the Planning Commission that you can see here on the slide, Architectural Board of Review, Historic Landmarks Commission, and American Institute of Architects. And they've been attending meetings. It's been the same group throughout all these years, providing input from staff or to staff, and reporting out to their respective boards and commissions on the status of the project. So they've been really instrumental. Again, community engagement has occurred throughout. We have a dedicated web page, and staff created a couple of fact sheets that go into more details about the standards in a video. I already mentioned there's been the 2 surveys. I do want to highlight that the Architectural Styles Map survey was prompted by your commission last year, where you recommended we go out and get more input. So we did do that over the sort of late summer and fall last year up to December, and we had maps posted in various locations around the city, and people could actually do a dot exercise and tell us their preference on styles. I've also made separate presentations to the American Institute of Architects and Habitat for Humanity about this project. So it's really been the result of a lot of collaboration and a lot of refinement. Again, the work group meetings I already mentioned. Design Review Board gave us comments when we met with them, and we definitely took those into consideration. The public surveys we already mentioned. We also have had a number of comment letters. A number of letters came in for the hearing last year and then throughout that we've responded to. That Planning Commission overview hearing last year was super helpful, and I think it was attachment C to your staff report describes the comments you gave us and how we responded. We've done a lot of staff research and input. Myself, Ms. Belts, and Ms. Falk sat together in a room and just worked on this document and to great detail to get it to where it is today. And of course, the expertise of our consultant team from Opticos. This slide just highlights some of the changes that have occurred, the more significant ones since you last viewed it. So we have consolidated chapters and removed some duplicative content. Again, revised the zone and architectural styles maps, and that was prompted by comments we got from your commission. We've clarified standards and some of the municipal code cross-references. And I believe it's attachment D to your staff report talks about the different cross-references to the Muni Code. I had a great team that went out and took tons of photos and chose and replaced all the photos with local Santa Barbara examples that are keyed to Santa Barbara neighborhoods. And where necessary, we revised graphics to improve the understanding. So next, I'll talk a little bit of why we're doing this project. Probably most importantly, it is for compliance with state law. The state's Housing Accountability Act is sort of an overarching theme of producing housing and preventing denial or density reductions of housing projects that are compliant with objective criteria. So we need that objective criteria to comply with this. Housing Crisis Act is part of the Housing Accountability Act, and it prohibits cities from enforcing subjective standards. Senate Bill 35 has been in for a few years. It provides a streamlined ministerial approval process for certain projects that are eligible for this and consistent with objective standards. And then there's additional legislation. It's not listed here, but it's in your staff report about other legislation that mandates streamlined review for projects that are consistent with objective standards. Importantly, it implements the housing element as well. We have HE7, Objective Design Standards program, whose whole goal is to get this adopted, and that was scheduled to be, or is scheduled to be completed by the end of this year. And there's also benefits for design review. Of course, again, objective design review necessary because it complies with state law and provides that predictable approval process. It also allows, the other path is discretionary design review, and then the boards can now make design-related decisions about projects for that path. So I'm going to pause for a moment before I hand it over to our Opticos team. They're going to describe the framework, but do you have any questions for me, or would you like us just to move on to there?
I think we'll move on and have
Okay.
your presentation first.
I just need a moment to switch slides. Let's see. Okay, now we got it. Okay.
Thank you, Rosie. Good afternoon, Planning Commissioners, Chair Bauke, Vice Chair Wardlaw. It's very nice to be here again, and thank you for having us this afternoon. As Dan mentioned, I'm here with my associate, Tony Perez, and the two of us have worked closely on this project. I'm Stefan Pellegrini. I'm principal at Opticos Design, and I'm excited to share this version of the odds with you. We are urban designers and architects, so we approach this kind of work in making zoning and objective design standards holistically. We seek to actually think about how individual buildings are contributing to neighborhoods and districts. And we also want to think about these standards in terms of what's achievable in modern development, but also can uphold sort of the high standards and traditions that places like Santa Barbara have. We've had an opportunity to work on objective design standards across California in response to recent state law, but we also have over a 25-year history crafting form-based codes and working with communities to enact zoning reform across the country to make places that are walkable and mixed use and really sort of human scaled. We also have an opportunity to work closely with many jurisdictions after odds and zoning codes have been adopted. And we do our best to sort of leverage this experience to understand what's effective in terms of standards and what can actually translate to best practices. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the primary form-based elements and approaches that went into sort of creating these odds. I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of the analysis that we did that helped to inform some of the key components of the code and how those actually provided inputs for some of the standards that you actually see in the draft. We started this process over a year ago with a city tour. We had an opportunity to be introduced to the applicable areas in the city and understand sort of the really broad variety of existing conditions. That was incredibly helpful, and I'll talk a little bit more about that moving forward in the presentation. We also conducted a variety of stakeholder interviews with a variety of interest groups and key stakeholders. We had an opportunity to converse with the working group over a whole series of meetings. We also looked closely at projects that actually had been recently gone through the development review process to understand how the existing zoning is being interpreted, but also the great work that the two review boards do to result in such a high quality output on the back end. And this was really important for us to understand, understand how the standards in the odds needed to be able to sort of reflect to a certain extent the work that those review boards do in their discretionary process. We've had a great relationship with staff. I would say that it's really been unparalleled, the work that we've been able to do with Rosie and Dan and her group. And I think the value and quality of what you see, the outcome, is really sort of reflective of the joint effort that we've been able to make. I mentioned that there is a real diversity in place that we see in the areas where the odds will apply. And one of the most sort of significant things for us to try to understand and emulate is that the core of Santa Barbara is really defined by a block scale character. It's buildings that actually fill up most of the property line and engage pedestrians at the street edge, create sort of a very high quality public front. But the neighborhoods where multifamily housing exists today and where it will be in the future are really made up of these house-scaled buildings where the front yards, the setbacks, the spaces between buildings are contributing to the character just as much as the built form. And so it really was important for us to sort of understand these conditions, to understand how they could actually be regulated through a series of zone districts. One of the things that we had an opportunity to do, for example, is through understanding the neighborhoods, we looked at the presence of buildings and their character as house scale or block scale buildings, and how those were characterized through architectural styles. What we see here, for example, is that the Mediterranean style group, the Spanish Revival style group, which I'll talk a little bit more about moving forward, is really sort of diverse and broadly represented in the city. But there are other style groups that actually have sort of more of a presence, more of an association with certain kinds of building types and environments. And so the way we sort of thought about regulating architectural style, the style groups and the styles map that form part of the odds were really informed by this analysis. The result is that the zone districts regulate by design sites. And we see that this is actually important to continue the architectural scale and character in existing neighborhoods and make sure that that is seen in new development. Sometimes new development actually results in lot consolidation. It can result in a change or a proposed change in scale and character. And so the design site strategy that's sort of built into the code assures that in those areas where a building scale is a key component of the existing conditions and the character that's presented, that the code can actually be a proponent of continuing that form and character in the future. That's also sort of articulated in the building type and massing standards. Each zone district has a family of building types which are allowed, and each of those sort of have a related building footprint, which is reflected and sort of reflects that sort of scale and outcome. This is designed to continue sort of the pattern that you see on properties today within the city and ensure that new development is retaining that scale and character. We see that this is sort of really one of the most important things with sort of driving context. Larger buildings tend to be bulkier. They result in issues relating to the existing context. And we also realized that this was a big and common topic in how the discretionary review process was asking project proponents to change and modify their designs around scale and relationship to that context. We also looked at public realm conditions. As I mentioned before, these block scale and building scale environments really create a real strong variety of conditions that are experienced by folks walking and traveling through the city. We looked at sort of the presence of how buildings interface with the public realm through what we call private frontage. This is the design of the transitional area between the front face of the building and the back of the sidewalk, and also sort of the other streetscape components that actually sort of contribute to that. If you go to the next slide, please, the result is sort of most clearly presented in the building frontage standards. These also are calibrated by zone district, where each zone district has a variety or family of frontage types that actually are allowed that new buildings can utilize. And these are designed to make sure that that interface with the public realm can continue the variety and diversity that we see in the city today. Another sort of outcome that you can see in the code where that is a result of this analysis is the way that setbacks and build-to lines are treated. Even in locations in the EPV where there is a lot of what we would refer to as zero lot line construction, where buildings sort of are inhabiting the back of the sidewalk, there is a lot of variation and nuance with courtyard spaces, forecourts. Once we get into the neighborhoods, it's very hard to find consistent setbacks across different properties. And so what the code does is actually introduces this concept of facade zones, which allows a great deal of flexibility, establishing a zone where project applicants can place the front of their building that actually is subject to sort of those frontage considerations. The outcome, I think we believe, again, is a lot of flexibility and creativity that can be provided through that objective standards lens. I mentioned a little bit sort of about the building types and massing as a bridge to sort of the architectural standards, which really sort of look and provide guidance for the details on buildings. There is additional information in the odds that guides facade composition. And we want to sort of ensure here that there is a continuity in how buildings actually express in terms of their definition into clear modules and bays that are human scaled. The code actually provides a variety of outcomes for each building type and provides direction for actually how that can actually be established to ensure, again, that there's sort of a lot of creative opportunities to respond to this code in a way that sort of meets and it complies with the existing conditions. The architectural styles, we started this analysis, and I think we looked at sort of 10 distinct architectural styles that exist in the city today. And through sort of iterations and work, we derived those down to 3 style groups, which you see presented in the draft. And those, of course, are reflected on the architectural styles map in terms of sort of where those are allowed in the city. We looked at those 3 style groups because they really presented sort of at a high level the families of architectural approaches that exist here. But we also saw in some of the best architecture, there is a lot of room for innovation and creativity that's occurred that is important and sort of valued by the community to consider. And so this section actually sort of looks carefully at the sort of dimensional qualities that is behind many of these styles to allow that flexibility to occur where project proponents can really sort of provide something that proportionally and stylistically is meeting that style, but does seek to provide a degree of flexibility in the outcome. So the key to objectivity in this section, which I think we've had a chance to talk with you about before, is really what's being dimensioned and called out. And hopefully there sort of is a good response that can sort of continue the high quality architectural variety that we see in the city. So all of this is sort of calibrated through this palette of zones, and the odds actually incorporate sort of 5 of them, and there is sort of a spectrum of intensity that is created from environments that are predominantly sort of lower intensity neighborhood conditions, predominantly made up of these house-scaled buildings, all the way up to sort of the EPV in the core of the city, where you see sort of a higher intensity block-scaled outcome. And the zones are sort of calibrated across many standards to provide an output that's reflective of these intensities. We know that when you look at this document in whole, it's a lot of content. It's a lot of information that needs to be sort of digested. But for most users of the code, they can actually focus on the standards that are contained just in particular to the zone districts and the applicable building types that actually each one of those contains. And we hope that that actually is sort of giving a very direct and straightforward set of standards that can be used for project applicants. So that concludes my introduction. I look forward to your comments and questions. So we're going to pause here at this point to see if there's any questions or comments.
Okay, I think we'll move to questions later after we hear from others. Mr. Buss, do we have a representative from the work group who'd like to speak at this time before we get to general public comment?
Chair Bauke, no, we will not have that today.
Okay. So we're going to open up to the public comment
Excuse me,
period.
Chair Bauke?
Sure.
Yes.
Staff has additional
Oh, they have
presentation.
another, okay. Well, then let's do that.
It's not going. Okay. I just need a moment to get to my place in the slides. They're not advancing forward for some reason. Come on.
Okay.
There's a little bit of a lag. Just one sec. I'm not sure.
Only if you ask questions.
Normally it goes straight to them, but okay. Almost there. Okay. Thank you for being patient with me. Okay, so there's a little bit more to the presentation. Now I'm going to walk you through a guide to using the odds. Again, as
You were looking for more.
Mr. Pellegrini explained, we have, here's a general overview of the chapters that are in the odds. There's 7 chapters with all the different standards. But we also have 2 quick code guides. And one is a general quick code guide for anyone using this document, and then there's a specialized one for architectural styles. So I'm just going to quickly walk through how this would work using the quick code guide. So before someone began, of course, you would need your basic site information, your lot size, and also your base zone. Base zone is important because if it's a mixed-use project, the uses would be by your base zone, and it also is factored into density calculations. The density of a site is from the general plan land use designations. Minimum for these projects is the base zone plus 1 unit, and the maximum is per the land use designation, for example, 28 to 36 dwelling units an acre. Next, you would identify what odd zone you were in. So Stefan has already sort of given an explanation of the 5 different zones. And this map just shows how they appear throughout the city with the less intense sort of neighborhood zones in yellow and moving into the core city of the downtown core and downtown edge. The site would be designed by applying that design site size. Typically, most projects will probably be, the lot size would be the same as the design site, but it does offer an opportunity on bigger sites to include several different building types without legal subdividing the site. And then the building type would be selected, and that articulates the size, scale, and massing of that zone. The building form standards would be applied, and the placement standards. And I kind of like this quote I got from the Urban Design Guidelines that says, to allow features of a greater pedestrian interest to dominate the streetscape. So we want to place spaces close to the public realm to comply with that and activate the street. The vehicle access and parking standards, what's a little different in Title 25 is that the parking is required to be towards the back of the site behind the livable space, and that's again to activate the streetscape for pedestrians. We have standards that are consistent with our Title 30 for bicycle spaces, and there's pedestrian access to be considered to continue to enhance that pedestrian-friendly design. Open yard standards are required, and of course they are there to enhance the environment and increase livability by providing access to light and air. They are, for odds projects, consistent with Title 30 as far as common and private open yard is concerned. One thing that's a little different for the odds projects is we do have landscape standards that are a little more expanded than what's in Title 30 because it talks about where landscaping goes, some minimum percentages, and refers to the city's water conservation standards for landscape materials. Again, Stefan already talked about the massing types that are available to shape the building form and the building footprints. There are massing and facade composition standards that, again, shape the built form. Buildings over 2 stories would designate a base, middle, and top. And then if there's a large block scale building that's 80 feet or longer, we have additional massing features required, 1, 2, or 3, depending on how long the building is. It could be a tower or a recessed volume or something like that. Again, to add interest to the building and to the street. One thing unique to this document are the adjacency and height standards. These were discussed at length with Historic Landmarks Commission, Architectural Board of Review, and also with our work group. It's a way to provide a transition from new, potentially larger buildings to existing smaller buildings. And this is something that often occurs during the design review process, but now it has to be objective. So it was a lot of work to figure out how to do this, but there are standards for that in a transition zone. We also have standards to lower buildings at the corners to protect public views of the mountains, and also standards, similar standards if you're adjacent, a new building is adjacent to an existing historic resource to provide some sensitivity to that resource. The frontage types are, go along with activating the streetscape and connecting to the public realm and creating that pedestrian-oriented environment. And they range from things like stoops and porches all the way up to shop fronts. Again, then the next step would be to apply that architectural style. We have the 3 style groups as mentioned, and then each style group has a subgroup with pretty detailed standards under those subgroups of features that exemplify those styles. Wanted to mention here the architectural styles map. This was another one that took a lot of time and public input. And it's sort of unique to our city. I don't know if other jurisdictions using this process actually dictate styles, but we do, and style's very important to our city. Some of it was based on what we already have in the El Pueblo Viejo Landmark District. So that's shown in yellow as Mediterranean style only, plus some other areas of the city where we felt that was important. In green, you see the Mediterranean and Craftsman style groups allowed, and so that was areas that are visible from Highway 101 and areas of the city that traditionally support those styles are in green. Blue is all styles groups allowed, and then we have a subset for the industrial substyle, and that's because the underlying zone in that area, it's shown in the hatch marks, is manufacturing, commercial, and coastal commercial arts and recreation. Those areas traditionally had light industrial uses and manufacturing, and so we felt that substyle was appropriate to limit to that area. Finally, someone, once they've gone through all those steps, would be ready to submit the project. There is a process for exceptions, which are minor deviations based on some site conditions. It could be there's a tree they want to retain, so they need some relief from setback standards or utility infrastructure or other situations. So that's all provided in Chapter 7, and then the objective design review process would proceed, which I will go over now. So I want to reiterate there are 2 design review options. The objective design review is for projects that are submitted in compliance with the odds. And then the subjective design review, applicants don't have to use the odds, and they can proceed using our existing subjective design review process. The highlights of this objective process are that projects still need to be approved by design review boards. This is in our city charter, and we're consistent with that. Concept review is not mandatory, but pre-application review is still an option. We are streamlining by combining project design and final design approval into one hearing. And the findings are very limited. These are set by the state. Projects need to be found to be consistent with the odds and have no significant adverse impacts to public health or safety. And the final action can only be appealed by the applicant to City Council. So for the applicant side, they will need to prepare really complete plans compared to perhaps how they approach it today. in compliance with the odds and then submit an application for objective design review. We will be creating new forms for this process and a detailed checklist for applicants to follow. Staff will then be tasked with reviewing those plans for compliance with the odds and scheduling the combined hearing. And the design review board would review plans for compliance with the odds. It could be that staff missed something or they just need to do that second check for these projects and hold the hearing and make the findings to approve or deny the project. Now I'm going to just briefly cover the Title 30 amendments. I know it was a big part of your packet. And there's a summary of these different categories that we put them in as attachment E in your staff report. But generally, they fall into either being odds-related directly or for cross-reference purposes. They could be clarifying and cleanup with no significant change. There were some sections that we were amending anyway, so we took that opportunity to do these cleanups. Some of them clarifying to streamline processes, and some were responses to state law, including some of these items were in our housing element as implementation. So I'm only going to focus on a couple of the directly odds-related amendments to Title 30. So on the topic of density, we've made some amendments so we can define base density and provide a methodology for calculating that. On the topic of determining creek top of bank, this is essentially a placeholder to provide an objective methodology for doing that for inland creeks. The Creeks Division is working on inland creek setback standards and top of bank determinations that will follow this process. And when that happens, then this placeholder will no longer need to be in this Title 30. For fractions, when you're doing density calculations, they'll be rounded up for housing projects so that sites can meet the odds density requirements. And this also came out of the average unit size density incentive progress report as a recommendation. And we think this would be a great addition as a citywide change. Then for affordable housing streamline approval, that's Senate Bill 35. We needed to have a reference to the odds for projects using that process. Again, we clarified that projects that comply with odds can only be denied per those specific findings. We have the new objective design review section for the review process. And finally, definitions. It's a big part of your packet, but there were definitions used to be in Title 25 odds, and we moved them into Title 30 so that all the sort of design and development review definitions are in one place. And this enabled us to shorten the odds document. Okay, so I do have a couple more things to explain. These, again, are the recommendations for amending the Muni Code for Title 25 and Title 30 amendments. But I wanted to mention a handout you got today with some addenda to that. This came out of some of the public comment letters, and there were a few things we felt like we could just take care of right now. So for Title 30, there were some comments regarding definitions in the graphics. So we are proposing to make some changes to that graphic and add definitions that were requested. And then in Title 25, we wanted to add some language that would clarify that density bonus is allowed, state density or city density bonus, and projects using that allowance can go over the general plan maximum densities. We needed to fix a reference to Title 30 to do with the creek top of bank, so that's a small change. And then the last thing we wanted to do was under the building types, you'll see some of the building types specify there's a max number of units per building, and that shouldn't be there, actually. So we want to remove that maximum and put a footnote in that says it's per the general plan land use designation for number of units per building. So that should clear up some of the confusion there. Also recommending that this odds and the Title 30 amendments are exempt from environmental review per the CEQA guidelines section. And the reason we're pursuing that exemption, it's minor alterations in land use limitations because the odds do not change density or intensity of use. It's consistent with the general plan and Title 30 uses. And the Title 30 amendments are administrative in nature. Finally, determining that they are also consistent with the general plan. And we found that in that consistency analysis, Exhibit F, they are consistent with policies that support objective standards, pedestrian-friendly design, and protection of historic resources. Finally, for next steps, should your commission be able to make a recommendation, and I should mention at this point, we've also set aside August 29th to continue this hearing if that's necessary. But then we would move on to ordinance committee, tentatively scheduled for October, so we can get to city council and meet our housing element implementation schedule in December. Effective date would follow early in 2025. We would do training. We will need to train staff and the boards and commissions in using this new code, get it into our online system, and prepare have the form and handouts ready to go. So with that, I'm going to conclude my presentation. I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you, Rosie. We're going to move on to public comments, and as Ms. DeBus noted, we do not have anybody from the work group that are speaking. So we're going to go to the public comments. I have another slip for you. We'll do in-person first and then go to virtual. So Ms. Johnson, you can start off the list.
Thank you, Chair Bauke. At this time, I do have 5 speaker slips, so I'll go ahead and start with Dennis Dordan, if you can make your way up to the podium, and then we'll have Dennis Whalen following.
Chair Bauke, Vice Chair Wardlaw, and Commissioners, my name is Dennis Dordan. I'm a commissioner on the Historic Landmarks Commission and a member of the work group that advised city staff on the draft under review here. My comments here and now, however, are strictly my own and are not connected to either the HLC or the work group. As you consider this draft, I ask you to reflect on a basic principle. Local officials and review boards working with the local design community are best equipped to make decisions about local development. Unfortunately, Sacramento does not agree. The state has passed a series of laws that have steadily encroached on the discretionary power of local authority. This is only the latest example, and it certainly will not be the last. Your responsibility is not to do what is fastest or easiest for Santa Barbara, but what is in the best interests of this community. Some commentators have described this draft as strict and noted strict standards do not accommodate special conditions or local site problems very well. Fine. We have processes in place to address special conditions at the local level as they should be. Can this draft be tweaked? Yes, certainly. Should the next draft be less prescriptive, looser, or simplified? Certainly not, for that would undermine, first, the central concept of objective standards, that they be predictable and require no interpretation. And secondly, there is a system already in place in Santa Barbara to review creative designs and innovative solutions to local conditions. Speaking for myself, I urge you to support strict rather than loose or flexible odds. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have Dennis Whalen, followed by Kevin DeMaine.
Chair and Commissioners, my name is Dennis Whalen, and like the other confluence of the Denai, I am here representing myself, although I am a member of the ABR and participated in the work group. The goal of the ADDS is to simplify the building process. Now, we all know the Mediterranean and craftsman styles are unquestionably part of our built fabric. However, there is little to no definition or agreement on what contemporary would be. One has to only go to Culver City to see the work of Errico and Moss to imagine what that might be. Architecture is nothing but fashion and a constantly shifting taste of the day. I suggest the commissioners consider eliminating the styles map, simplify the ordinance to one style, that which is stated in the city charter, which reflects the city's unique and established architectural traditions. This would greatly simplify the process, not only for design professionals, but the staff ministerial review process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, we'll have Kevin Demain, followed by Christine Perrion.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Dumaine. I'm an architect with Design Arc Architects. The idea of the odds is very encouraging. I look forward to it as being a way to improve and expand the housing stock in the community. Looking through these draft ordinances, so I find that the success of this program will come when you find sort of a sweet spot. It can't be too lenient and allow some bad projects, and on the flip side, it can't be too strict and nothing gets built. Then why have the ordinance? So I've had a chance to sort of look over the draft standards and compare them to a project that we have in our offices currently in our drawing stage. And that's on Haley Street, and it's in the MUC zone, and it would be considered a large courtyard because that would be the best use for achieving the density. And so when comparing what we've got approved, which is 26 units plus 4 short-term rentals over parking and commercial, and then comparing them against the standards, there's quite a discrepancy about what you could build under the proposed odds. I was using the draft standards, though, and Rosie and Dan have pointed out a few things that have already been modified, which are a positive step in the right direction. But still, there is a huge discrepancy. And so from my perspective, looking at that specific type of project, I don't believe a developer would pursue this method in that location. But there does seem to be some opportunity to come back and make some tweaks to some of those numbers, the setbacks, some of the heights. You know, maybe they're minor, maybe they're more significant. It just takes a little more study. And you should also sort of look at the other types from that perspective. You know, are these proposed standards, how do they measure up against projects that have been built? And then you guys have the very difficult challenge of what's the sweet spot for what should be allowed. So it's not going to be easy, but good luck.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Christine Perrion, followed by Rob Fredericks.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Balke, Vice Chair Wardlow, and Commissioners. My name's Christine Perrone. I'm a partner at the Cornell Collective, and I did submit a letter to you having run through these new standards with a current project that I just submitted into the city under SB 35. It's a 100% affordable housing project. And before I kind of go over that letter, I just do want to reinforce a little bit what has been said. I do really appreciate all of the hard work that has gone into these. I do certainly applaud the concept of objective design standards. And I apologize that I'm coming in at the end here with some analysis that I think shows some flaws in the current standards draft. I wish it had happened sooner, but this is when I had a project that I could really use and run through what it meant for a particular project that was 100% affordable. I think that in my letter, I kind of walked through a little bit of the thought process that we use for addressing smaller scale neighborhoods and being respectful of them. I'm very fortunate that I'm working with both our Excellent Housing Authority and the Santa Barbara Unified School District on this project, and they are very concerned about being good neighbors. So it showed to me a limitation in how these were written, that I couldn't do the project I was doing, and if I used these standards, I think it would have a reduced quality of a building. Now, I know what has already been said is, well, you can always pursue the subjective route. For our affordable, 100% affordable housing projects, we're looking to expedite and support them by saying that it's automatically go back to subjective and go through the design review process. In all honesty, that's the thing that takes some of the longest for us to get through our entitlements. So I think that's a little bit of a flaw. Now, I understand from reading the current draft, and I assume this has not changed, that projects using state density bonus would be allowed to use their waivers on any of the ODD's development standards. And I would appreciate as a question back to staff or to council, if that is the case, that the standards as written and as will be recommended to the council will allow the use of our waivers and concessions. If that's the case, then I think that we could potentially support this. So, thank you again for your time, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I ask her a question?
Sure.
Thank you for that. Ms. Perone, I just wanted to ask you, do you feel that it might have been different for you if you had already designed this project and were trying to apply it? Do you think that the process may have worked better if you hadn't designed it and you tried to use the process? I know you, in your letter, you said you stopped midstream because it just couldn't take it any further, but.
Thank you, Commissioner. That is a great question, and I had the same thought myself. And I asked myself, well, what would have happened? And I think I would have come to the same stopping point. I would have been seeing what I could use, that type of building, which was a courtyard-style building. I need to fit the parking on that site. Parking has its, structured parking has a lot of requirements on its own. And I think I would have probably ended up stopping and opting out. Or once I couldn't get confirmation, I would be starting to use waivers to allow us to do projects that meet the intent. Again, we all want to continue to have our quality, our wonderful architectural Santa Barbara neighborhoods. But we probably would have to opt out or use waivers to get around some of this over-restrictiveness.
Thank you for that answer. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Up next, we'll have Rob Fredericks, followed by Steve Johnson.
Good afternoon, Chair Balke, Vice Chair Wardlow, and Planning Commissioners. Rob Fredericks with the Housing Authority of the City of Santa Barbara. First want to say that I in no way want to appear at odds with the odds. This is something that we have long advocated for in order to move developments such as the ones that we do that are affordable through the process quicker, and it's something that's needed and that provides certainty. I certainly I love the goals that's being achieved through this of increasing predictability, promoting a livable city, respecting context, and creating a visual language that is so needed to have as the base for these objectives, design and development standards. And I don't want to even pretend that I have the knowledge base that the august public commenters before me have provided already. I'm looking for something of that Goldilocks sweet spot on this final these final standards that can be implemented that that provide that certainty, but also doesn't kick a development out from using the objective design standards because of one little thing that doesn't work. Oh, sorry, you have to go with the subjective route now. I would love to see a little bit of flexibility there, something along the Chapter 7 exceptions that can be worked in, and also what Ms. Perone just mentioned, just clarifying that we can use the waivers that are granted under state bonus density law that under the objective design standards. That would be helpful. I noticed that on Ms. Deisty's slide number 2, it showed Mr. Fredrickson's house from the movie Up. Carl Fredrickson's house between our two developments, right? Casa de las Fuentes and El Carrillo. Those are two fantastic developments between that sandwiches in a small single-family home that we tried to purchase from the owner. They didn't want to sell for very good reasons. They loved their home. They didn't want to sell, so we worked around it. But I worry about would those two developments that are often lauded as terrific developments that are held high, that you should do these types of designs, if that would even pass under the objective design standards, given that the courtyards don't have a U courtyard that faces the street. Those courtyards don't. So I'll leave it at that, and I thank you for your consideration, and I thank the city team as well for moving this along. It's so important. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Up next, we'll have Steve Johnson, followed by Ellen Bildstein.
Members of the commission, thanks for this opportunity. My very narrow focus is with Top of Bank because it impacted a project I have at 515 West Los Olivos. I'll say a little bit about Top of Bank determinations. Nowhere in any FEMA document will you find a definition of Top of Bank. Nowhere in any Army Corps document will you find a definition of Top of Bank. It's inherently not easily definable. Army Corps has something close, ordinary high water mark, for which they have 6 criteria for subjectively determining ordinary high water mark. So I think this is a fool's errand trying to come up with an objective standard to define Top of Bank. But it's especially a fool's errand if the application produces a Top of Bank which is outside the floodplain. Any definition which produces a Top of Bank outside of the floodplain would elicit howls of laughter from any civil engineer. My suggestion is to do what many cities have done. Don't try to come up with a definition. Simply create a map that shows the Top of Bank for the section of Old Mission Creek. We're talking about Old Mission Creek. That's really the issue here. Not Old Mission Creek, excuse me, Mission Creek. Create the map. Get a specialist of some sort to help create the map. Then if residents want to challenge the map, they can do so. But once the map is adopted, it's objective from then on to eternity. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Up next, we'll have Ellen Bildstein, followed by Cass Ensberg.
Good afternoon, Planning Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'll start by thanking city staff and Opticos for all the hard work that I know you've been doing for the last couple of years. As an architect in town, I was involved in the early days of the work group and continue on in the capacity of the AIA advocacy group. And I've been part of the process, hearing from Deddy Pikert and Cass Ensberg about their takeaways from their involvement with the work group. And we know that there's been a lot of effort that's gone into this. AIA wrote a letter that I believe you may have taken a look at, which summarizes 5 primary concerns that we have ongoing with the ODDS and the latest version that came out last month. The primary one, or excuse me, the first of the 5 is development potential. My understanding is that there hasn't been a thorough study of the implications of all of the development standard aspects that are incorporated into this document. And I understand from folks who have spoken earlier today and presented specific projects that demonstrated that ODDS would have potentially reduced the development potential of those projects, that there are changes occurring real time. And I think it seems that there's a lot being expected of the commission to digest, not only of all the ODDS, many stipulations, but also now creeks changes and changes to Title 30. All of these have broad implications, and it just seems like it's going to take a lot of time and effort to digest all the changes that are being proposed and to really understand what they all mean. There is a state law called the No Net Loss Law, which would not allow for this document to in any way reduce the amount of development on behalf of housing that we would be allowed to adopt as a local jurisdiction in response to the state mandate for an objective design standard document. AIA seeks for the city to provide more information about a comparison to what current zoning would allow and then what the outcome of ODDS would be in those same situations. Architectural styles map, we think there are areas of town, as we know, El Pueblo Viejo, that is prescribed, and that perhaps the rest of the city could remain open to the variety of styles that we currently have. So thank you so much for all the efforts, and we look forward to the ongoing conversation to sort through all the big issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, we'll have Cass Ensberg.
Good afternoon, Chair Balke and commissioners, also staff, community, and our consultant, Opticos. I am Cass Ensberg, and I'm just delighted to be here today. I'm really excited. We've been working on this for so long, and it's really a thrill to be here today at this moment. And I appreciate all the great comments today from everyone who has spoken. This is the time for us to do this. I'm a member of the ODDS work group and a liaison to the AIA-SB. And as you know, the work group provided a letter, and so did AIA-SB, which that Ms. Bilston just mentioned. So I hope the information, the questions, and the comments in those letters were helpful for your discussion today as we move forward. I'm speaking for myself right now as an architect and a citizen, and to add a few points to what has already been stated. And I especially appreciate the comments from Mr. Dorden. As always, I want to express gratitude and special thanks to our skilled planners and our consultant Opticos for the excellent work over the past 2 years. The work has been thoughtful and inclusive. I want to strongly encourage and support that these ODDS, I have a couple of comments. And with respect to the issue that was brought up by Ms. Perrone, and in her letter, I wonder if courtyards could have more than one access point than how they are currently shown in the objective design development standards. I think this is worth looking at, and I think she brought up a very good point, and perhaps there's a way of adjusting the document to address that. I support the styles map, and I think it's a very important preservation element. I struggle with the contemporary style. There are so many different contemporary styles, and in this document, it seems too restrictive to me. So I wonder if proposals for modern and contemporary styles are better to go the route of the traditional design review. And then finally, I wanted to say that I don't think that we've had enough focus on our successes. And I wanted to just point out that the Soltara project has just been almost complete, and I believe it has 78 units, and it's in the downtown, and it is getting ready for move-in on early September. Also, Sanctuary Centers is 34 units and is now under construction. Hooray. And as a member of HLC, in the last year and a half, I can think of at least 6 housing projects that are in El Pueblo Viejo, just El Pueblo Viejo, that have moved forward through the design process smoothly and successfully. And I now hope these projects will get through the plan check and permit process, which is another area where streamlining would be helpful for time and cost savings, in my opinion. Thank you so much for your work, so appreciated, and I look forward to moving this forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, I don't have any further speaker slips, and I'm not seeing any movement, so I'll go ahead and move to virtual public comment. If you wish to speak on Zoom at this time, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you. I'm not seeing any hands raised, but we did receive written correspondence from Steve Johnson, Rob Fredericks, Christine Perrion, Kevin Demain, Dennis Dorden, Deddy Pikart, Cass Ensberg, Richard Six, Robert Uli, Dennis Whalen, Pat Saley, Jessica Wishin, Amy Fitzgerald Tripp, and Fred Sweeney. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Bauke.
Okay, thank you. Does staff have any additional information they want to present or to respond to the comments that have been done by the public before we start asking our many questions? Just want to give you a chance.
Chair Bauke, I think it's better just to go ahead and ask your questions and
Okay.
see where we go.
Good. Just wanted to give you a shot. Okay. Which of my commissioners would like to start the questions? Commissioner Wiscombe, followed by Commissioner Boss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to staff and Opticos for your presentation, and also to all of you that have shown up today to talk about this important work. I think it's great to hear from the public on this too, and particularly our design professionals. So I have some really nitpicky little questions, and then I'll get to a few broader ones. But I wanted to, and I think you want to hear about both, even though the nitpicky ones are kind of boring. But Table 2501-040A, General Plan Land Use Designations, you talk about the ODDS zones, but you use the lettering only, and there's no indication of what they are until you get further into the document. So could you please add that as a note so we know exactly that it's, it's not the MUC, it's the, whatever it is. So that would be great. And I'm getting a nod, so I gather that's okay. And then I know definitions, you move that to shorten up the ODDS document. Do we call it odds? Is that what we're supposed to call it?
You can call it whatever you would like.
Okay.
Or Title 25.
Oh,
if you'd
Title
rather say
25.
that.
Okay, that's what I'll call it. So we moved the definitions to Title 30, but it's absolutely massive, the amount of definitions. And I don't know, maybe we could be a little bit cherry picking some definitions to include in Title 25. That would be my suggestion. Maybe you got comments the other way, but I went through and tried to find one. I don't even remember what it was now in Title 30. And, I clicked on the letter, and then I went down the list, and then I realized it wasn't there. It was C something else. So I had to go back and do it. So it was a very cumbersome process. So is that something that you might consider?
Chair Bauke and Commissioner Wiscombe, I think I'd love to hear from the rest of the commission, but are you saying maybe there's some very specific Title 25 related
Yes.
definitions you'd like to
Yes.
see put back?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to hear the rest of the commission if they felt the same way.
Okay.
But it's something we could do if that's what you
Okay,
want.
yeah. Okay, and then I didn't understand, and I'm not an architect, so I didn't understand this. We're talking about windows and glazed openings. I mean, I really did try to go through this document. In number 2, window is placed at an angle of at least 30 degrees measured perpendicular to the adjacent interior property line. What the heck does that mean? Mr. Pellegrini, are you willing to take this on?
Thank you, Chair Bauke and Commissioner Wiscombe. I think you're referring to the privacy standards. Is that
Yes,
correct?
I am, yes. You tilting a window or what?
Without having this in front of me, it's the angle as it appears in plan. And so the idea is that if you're in a side property line and a window is actually not directly facing the neighbor, you sort of would think of it differently. And the angle that's described would be comparable to if you are standing in a bay window and you're looking out one of the side windows.
I
So,
see,
yeah.
okay. Okay, I get it now,
Yeah.
thank you. I was thinking of it the other way. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. And then going on, there's, I guess, when I hear your comments from the design professionals, I kind of get that some of these things seem really, really strict to me. But we, as Mr. Dordan said, we want to do things in the best interest of the community, so I get that. But I wanted to go on the community open space. You talk about plazas, and it's a mostly hardscaped area that provides pedestrians a gathering space away from the street. So good definition. And then you say a plaza must be 50 by 50 feet minimum. Why is that? I mean, we have small plazas and bigger plazas, so why is there that restriction? That seems to me something that would really frustrate an architect or someone that's trying to design this.
And, sorry, Commissioner Wiscombe, could you reference a page number? 'Cause
Yes,
it's easier
page
for-
83D, community open space.
Thank you.
I think that's right. I have another number here, but do I have the right page?
Almost there.
I don't have the document printed out, so, and I couldn't possibly page through everything.
Okay, yeah, that's not the correct page, but I'll find it.
I have another number here,
60?
I don't know.
Okay, we got the right page. It's
Okay.
60.
Is it 60? Because I have that number written down here, but, okay.
It's item 7A. A plaza must be 50 feet by 50 feet minimum. I'm going to ask Mr. Perry. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is, thank you, Chair Bakke and Commissioner Wiscombe. This is in the context of the site design standards, which are in section 2503. And this is sort of pointing to community open space requirements that would form part of a larger project. So the idea is that, yes, in the context of providing plaza space in different sorts of projects, there could absolutely be a plaza that would be smaller than that scale. But the idea here is that this would actually be meeting the community open space requirement for a larger project to go through an application review and approval process that would be providing community open space that would be usable for the broader community. So the definition here is, I would say, is for a plaza in this instance, which would be applicable to projects of, I'm going to ask Tony what the threshold is, 2 acres or more would be required to provide community open space of this size.
Okay, I don't know if we're going to have any projects like that, but maybe we will. Could we change it to, a minimum number of square feet with a minimum dimension in one direction to give some flexibility to it?
Yeah, Chair Bakke and Commissioner Wiscombe. Certainly, we could adjust that. Do you have something in mind?
No.
Okay. We might have to come back to you.
No, I don't. I just
Yeah.
find it to be an arbitrary number that just seems like, well, that's not quite going to work for me because mine can only be 40 feet wide.
I see, yeah.
So I think some flexibility would be great.
Another thing we could consider is in Chapter 7 exceptions, to add an exception to allow the plaza to be a
Okay,
different
I'll
dimension.
get to Chapter 7
Okay.
exceptions in a minute. I have some exceptions to the exceptions in Chapter 7. Okay, and then, let's see here. Okay, I guess I'm there. Is that page 202 and 203? Is that exceptions? I'm under D, findings. For the review authority to grant an exception, findings for the exception in table 25.07.020.A, exceptions to standards for design sites with 10% or less average slope, or another table for over 10% slopes are required.
Okay, yeah, I'm there.
So, okay, and the reason I'm bringing this up is we may not know all the exceptions. We may not know any of the exceptions. I object to the tables there with exceptions listed because I think that they still have to go through a process where, yes, we'll accept your exception, or we will reject your exception, right? Is that right?
Correct, there is a
Yeah.
process for
Okay,
that.
so I just think that for flexibility's sake, like Ms. Perone may want to come and say, I have an exception, I don't want to face my courtyard to the, whatever you call it, the primary frontage of the street. I want to face it another way because it's better for me to face it that way because it's for kids and it's got a space next to it, et cetera. So I just feel like you've really restricted it to listing exceptions when that might be a very valid exception that's not in one of these tables.
Yeah, Commissioner Wiscombe, that is a tricky challenge because we are, again, needing to have objective standards. And so it gets a little too subjective if we leave it just open-ended on what the exceptions could be or the reasons for them. So I don't know how to strike that balance without listing them all out here. There could be more we add if you feel like we're missing some.
Yeah, well, I feel like that's one of them right there. There's a perfectly logical reason why,
Yeah.
she's faced the courtyard towards the neighborhood. Actually, several reasons why she's faced it towards the neighborhood, the open part of it, and not to the primary
Yeah, and
building frontage.
Commissioner
So-
Wiscombe, we've been talking about the courtyard comment internally as well, and we think there could be an adjustment, pretty simple adjustment just to the text, not in exceptions, but just make it clear you can have an internal courtyard. And that could be an easy fix.
Okay, that's good, okay. Okay, and then I just had a question about the recorded covenant. I'm on to, I think I'm on to Title 30 now. This is the changes, to Title 30. So you've eliminated the affordability, the 90-year minimum affordability, and had a brief conversation with Commissioner Boss this morning at the gym, where we talk at 5 a.m., and she said that that's the state's changed that to 55 years, I think, yeah. So I'm just wondering why this has been crossed out, and how are you dealing with this now, and what happens to the projects that have the minimum 90-year affordability?
Chair Bauke and Commissioner Wiscombe, could you refer to what section of Title 30 you're in? That
I'm
would
sorry,
be
I'm on
helpful.
page 274, number 2, recorded covenant.
Okay, and I may ask Ms. Ostringer or Ms. Belts to help me with this one.
So, Chair Bauke, Commissioner Wiscombe, I believe what you're referring to is the change, because I'm not seeing that page.
You struck out the "and affordability shall continue for a minimum of," oh, wait a minute. Okay, so let me go back here. It says, A, all of the residential units on the real property shall be rented or sold to very low or low-income households or seniors. The maximum rent or sales price and the maximum household income of tenants, occupants, or owners shall be determined as set forth in, and you struck out state law, and then it says, so set forth in the Affordable Housing Policies and Procedures Manual, and then you struck out, and affordability shall continue for a minimum of 90 years from the initial occupancy of the residential unit. So if we move the affordability to the Housing Policies and Procedures Manual?
Commissioner Wiscombe, it's in there as 90 years, yes, so it's not changing. The state law for state density bonus projects for portable units is, I believe it's 55 years. But we also have our own AUD program, which then those units are 90.
Yeah, okay, so, but this is in the Affordability Housing Policies and Procedures Manual, because you've now taken it out of Title 30.
Correct.
Okay, that was my question, okay. I was just surprised to see that. Okay, and then I had a question about reduction for, This question relates to electric vehicle charging stations. And I'm on page 278. Number 3, an accessible parking space with an access aisle served by electric vehicle supply equipment, or an accessible parking space with an aisle designated as a future electric vehicle charging space shall count as 2 standard automobile parking spaces. I'm really confused on this one because ADA requires an aisle, an access aisle, unless the code has changed. So how, you've implied here that the aisle becomes a future electric vehicle parking station, and then it's counted as 2 parking spaces?
Commissioner Wiscombe, I'm going to ask that Ms. Grant come up and address that one because it's a parking related.
I always have to ask her a question anyway. Hello, Ms. Grant. You might as well stay up there because I know that Commissioner Barnwell's going to have questions for you.
That was one of my first questions.
I thought I'm
Commissioner-
going to beat you to it this time.
Wiscombe, through the chair. So for this one, it's basically that you're getting a credit of parking in order to facilitate EV parking.
Oh, okay, but you're putting an EV station in the access aisle? This is just totally confusing, and maybe it just needs to be updated a little bit so we can
Served by electrical.
understand it. It says an accessible parking space with an access aisle served by electric vehicle supply equipment, or an accessible parking space with an aisle designated as a future electric vehicle charging space. So that implies that you're going to be able to put an EV station in an access aisle for ADA, I think. At least that's the way I'm reading it, and I don't think the ADA code has changed for access aisles.
Give me a moment on
Yeah,
that. It's-
that's fine, and I'm not meaning to put you on the spot, but maybe the intention is, maybe it's not reading correctly in terms of what the intention is.
There are, for EV parking, you have to, the parking space, at least one of them has to meet like an ADA dimension, even though it's not an ADA space.
Okay, so it has to be full,
So
yeah, okay.
that's essentially what it's
So that's 20
also
by,
covering.
20 by whatever it is, 9 or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, okay, but,
But I think the gist or takeaway from it is that we don't want to hinder development for providing ADA and EV parking spaces. So
Okay.
when we're doing counting of spaces per zoning requirement, there's a credit there.
okay. Well, okay, I still don't, it's still.
But we can work on that.
Yeah, it still implies to me
wording,
that you're
yes.
putting an EV station in an access aisle, which would be a hindrance to someone trying to use the access aisle
Right, it's
with a
not meant
disability.
to
Yeah,
be that
okay.
way, but we'll
Okay.
work on that.
Great, okay. Okay, and then I wanted to ask Ms. Ostranger, we talk about the project will not result in specific adverse impact to public health or safety that cannot be mitigated without rendering the project infeasible. Do we have any examples that you know of, Ms. Ostranger, where public safety or health has come into consideration for a project?
I don't know of any, we consider it whenever there's a plan review.
Right.
The plan check staff is looking at that. I can't really think of any. The only thing I could think of is perhaps a building that's extremely high in the city of Santa Barbara, and the fire truck couldn't get, we don't have the proper truck. But
Okay.
if they could mitigate it by buying, paying for the city to buy a bigger truck, then that would be a way to mitigate it.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious about that, if that ever gets used. Okay, and then, I don't know why, I don't have the page number, but number 2, the modification is necessary to accomplish any one of the following. And then it's E, construct a housing development to meet special housing needs of the elderly, persons with disabilities, large families, homeless persons, single and small households, farm workers, students, homeless persons and families, and any other group with special needs. Would it be appropriate to add veterans supportive housing to this basket of categories? Because we do have
Chair Bauke and Commissioner Wiscombe, I think it would be fine to add that.
Okay.
It came from the housing element, but it could be a group that could be
Yeah, I
added.
just think it would be
Yeah.
good to add that, because we do have veterans housing here, so.
Yes,
yeah,
correct.
Okay, great. Okay, and then I wanted to ask Mr. Pellegrini a question about, you said your presentation that you're implementers, and do you revisit jurisdictions where you do these ODDS documents? Do you revisit the jurisdictions to see what works and what doesn't work? And do you have some sort of ongoing modification program? Does that make sense, my question?
Through the chair, yes, it does, and yes, we do. I think I would say that odds present a challenge because they are asking cities to regulate things that they historically have not regulated, and most cities don't really know how that's going to go. It's a very difficult thing to predict because expectations and just, I would say, conventions in cities are very different, very diverse. So when you start to regulate new things, there often is a learning curve that happens on both sides. Staff need to be ready to respond and process applications that has additional information, and applicants need to start demonstrating drawing sets and design sets that actually can indicate they're meeting all of the standards. And there's usually a learning curve that happens there. And sometimes there is a process where they determine that there's things that maybe they thought were really important to regulate, which fall away. And then sometimes it actually raises issues about other things, which are not included here, which actually might need to be supplemented. It's very common for issues around interpretation to arise, again, because you are regulating new things.
So would you say that this is an ongoing process for you then, of an ongoing learning curve for you of things that?
Through the chair, yes, I think what we try to leverage is standing behind the sort of effectiveness of the standards that are created here, the best practices where they've been applied to other places, our knowledge that communities can work with these types of standards. But there is sort of an iterative process, I think, that all cities need to go through in order to identify really sort of what's working best for them. I would say the level of prescription here is much higher than other cities. There's higher expectations which are set. So I would feel positive about the level of prescriptiveness that's actually included in here, and both staff's and the design community's ability to work with this level of standards.
Great, okay, thank you for that answer, I really appreciate that. Okay, and then I think my final question, I'm sure you're all glad about that, is in state bonus density, do they get to use the waivers? I remember reading, yes, they do, right?
Yes, Chair Bauke and Commissioner Wiscombe, yes. In fact, as your addenda identifies, we're going to make a couple adjustments to clarify that, but yes.
Okay.
Waivers and concessions are
Where
available.
did I see that? I can't remember. Was that in Title 30 or was that?
Title 30.
Okay.
And then
yeah.
referenced in Title 25.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Great. So, and I think, yep, that's all I have. Thank you very much for those answers, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Next, Commissioner Luis Boss.
Thank you. First, just want to thank staff again. This is one of several projects that are on time according to the housing element update, and it just makes me very happy. So thank you. You continue to restore my faith, and we are moving forward to meeting our community's housing needs. I really appreciate the responses to our comments, too. That was helpful, even though my beloved Victorian was not included. I understand they can go through the normal process as they can with other styles as well. And great community engagement in response to the Planning Commission comments, too. I think it was like 250 people were engaged in the styles mapping. So just first, all the thank yous. And then a couple of questions. First, about just kind of a general concern about the reduction in affordable housing development potential. And I'm asking this because I saw a lot of pictures of housing authority projects throughout the odds document. And I was curious how many of them would have actually been able to use odds. So what real life models, whether housing authority, affordable housing projects or others, did you use like to a T this could go through odds?
Yeah, Chair Balke and Commissioner Boss, I don't really have that information right now. That would be an effort that would be very hard. It's very hard to compare apples to oranges, essentially, because they were designed using a different process. So that exercise that we got from the architects was super helpful for us. It's something we've actually been asking for from our architecture community for a while now, and I know it's a lot of work, and you know, we were happy to get this, even though it was a little bit late. But you know, as far as we know, at least the density should be achievable. For the most part, the setbacks are consistent with what people already have in Title 30. The height standards are the same as Title 30. So it's a little hard to know, for example, if the parking standards or open yards the same. So it's very hard to know what exactly in the odds might not be consistent with some of these projects that have already been built. We do know the housing authority projects are very good-looking projects, so they made good examples for our community. So like I said, I can't answer exactly that question, but we think we're pretty confident it'll work. It looks like Mr. Gullett wants to add.
Yes, thank you. Chair Balke, Commissioner Boss, I also can't answer the question, but regarding state density bonus law, which most of housing authorities projects qualify for, the state gives us a very powerful tool in waivers and concessions where any of these things are adjustable to provide for those projects.
Thank you. And then a follow-up question. I think there was discussion about allowing courtyards to have more than one access point, so that could be considered under state density bonus waivers and concessions. But is it also, could it also be explicitly spelled out? Yes, I'm seeing nods.
Commissioner
Okay.
Boss, yes, we could, you know, on your motion or direction, we could, we've already identified some small adjustments we could make to make that clear.
Okay, thank you. I think those are my main, well, I'll ask this other one. I'm just thinking about the goal of, there were several goals, but part of it is just really streamlining in general and getting projects through more quickly. And I'm wondering if it's through odds or another avenue that we can get affordable housing projects either to the front of the line or through more quickly. And I'm thinking about Jacaranda Court, which I think has been in place since 2018. So, and that, you know, that's a great project, I think. But we're on year 7 of it moving through, and I know there are reasons for that, but how do we get these things to happen faster? Is it through odds or something else?
I'll start answering that, and I may look to Ms. DeBusk to finish, but for the odds projects at least, again, that combined final and project design approval in one hearing should provide a significant savings in time it takes to get that approval. I think there's other efforts underway to, for affordable housing projects, to put them at the top of the queue through building permit phases. I don't know if Ms. DeBusk wants to add anything to that, but my understanding is that's underway.
Okay, see nod, thank you. And then one other question, the odds project approval overview. I think it was slide 39, and then it was also on page 16 and 35, the detailed checklist. So I think it said that that will be developed, and I'm just thinking there's a checklist and a handbook and 400 pages, and then there's a separate checklist. So I'm just curious if you have a sample of that or a draft of that where you can share any more information, or is it just a mystery?
Commissioner Boston, through the chair, the checklist is something I intend to start as soon as I'm sort of finished with this hearing process, and I want to have it ready by the time we get to ordinance committee and city council further down the line. I envision it as a way for applicants to get through the standards that they need to show us, basically where on their project plans their project complies with all the different various standards that apply to their project. I don't think it'll be extremely long. It might be, maybe a 10-page checklist of, and it's a way for applicants to show us, oh, I see we had this standard specific to windows, go to this page on the plans, and this is where we complied with that standard. It's something I want to get some input from my team members on a good format for the checklist. That's why we haven't been able to complete it yet, and I've been collecting samples from other cities, so I see how they do it. So it's in the works, but we just haven't been able to get to it yet.
Great, thank you. Those are my questions.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner DeLucio, followed by Commissioner Lodge.
And I can go all over the place here. But I want to thank staff, first of all, for, as I walked in, I said, you've done an excellent job on this and staying with this for so many years. And the consultants, thank you very much. And also especially members of the public on the boards and the commissions who have contributed to this as well. I have some questions. I'm going to move around a little bit. Some definitions are exclusive to odds, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Can those possibly be moved into the odds document?
Yeah, again, if that's sort of a motion that you make
Okay, so we can do that
to
later.
staff.
Because I think that could be a good way of lightening up the definitions that are in the chapter 30, is it? The other thing is, going back a little bit, the consultants, you've had, how much experience have you had with this? I mean, have you executed a number of these documents, and how many years has this been going on? So I'm trying to figure out what experience do you have that after this went into effect with the odds and this objective, what has the usage been? What, have people have gone towards the odds, or are you still finding a lot of them using this objective?
Thank you. Through the chair, Commissioner DeLucio. I'll say a couple of things in response to that. One is a sort of broader tradition of form-based codes, which I mentioned, which have been, I would say, used by municipalities now for about 25 years. The best examples that we have in California are cities that are probably, I would say, 15 to 20 years into a form-based zoning ordinance and have sort of a family of development. We do have a unique situation here in Santa Barbara, so I want to be careful to sort of generalize. The other piece is on cities that have been adopting objective design standards in response to recent state laws for multifamily and other places where residential is allowed. That is a process that we're about 4 or 5 years into. On our side, we've worked now with, I'm going to say, about 20 communities that have moved to sort of adopt objective design standards. The challenge that we have on that, to be frank, is that the projects going through that review process, because most of those codes are fairly new, the data that we have is still emerging in sort of how cities are responding to odds. That is compiled by the fact that the vast majority of housing entitlements, when we look broadly in the state, are SB 330 and SB 35 projects, which, so there is a process we need to go through to analyze what the zoning is saying and what concessions and waivers are being asked for. We're in a time period where we need to look forward to additional data.
Okay, that's a good answer. And I think the state has messed all this up too. So anyway, good or bad. So when I think you've made a comment that you did review some of the projects that were done in Santa Barbara, and you found that they would work within the odds, the form.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. And one of the things I want to reiterate is that there is the zoning envelope, which is presented in Title 30 today. And then there's the outcome that occurs through the discretionary review process. And what we found is looking at the projects that we analyzed that were projects that had gone through the process in the last few years is those two things were never the same. There was always sort of a molding, a very sort of, you can see the positive outcomes of the discussion, what the work that the discretionary review boards do. But the full zoning envelope was consistently not achieved when we were able to sort of look at those existing projects. The challenge became how to actually objectify that process, which is you see sort of a result of that in the draft here today.
So just another follow-up. I did read all the letters. The letters are really good, and that's where the concerns had come out that how can we really do these projects? But then what surfaced in all that was that if you added in the state bonus density with the waivers and the concessions, that may make it more possible to use the form to the advantage of the applicants. So are you going to be looking to add the waivers and the concessions into the exceptions?
Commissioner DeLucia, through the chair, the waivers and concessions through state density bonus is something that's on a case-by-case basis because every applicant has different needs. So they often will waive things like maybe open yard dimensions or setbacks or parking. So it's not really something we need to add into the exceptions. It's just something they would ask for on a case-by-case basis. There's also certain affordability requirements to qualify for density bonus.
But how would you connect the dots here is really what I'm asking. I don't know if they knew it or not. A couple of the letters, they didn't really realize that until it came up a little bit today in the meeting. So how are we going to educate folks that, that you can do that?
Commissioner DeLucia, through the chair, I think, there's a couple places in Title 25 that mention use of state density bonus, and it's included to further clarify in the addenda that was, you have a hard copy of today. So I think that way applicants will realize that's available to them should they choose to use it.
Okay, and I have another question. I don't know if you have this information. It's okay. Looking at the map, you have the three different colors, and one, I guess it's the blue, would have all three, and the contemporary. What percent of that map do you think is contemporary?
Commissioner DeLucia, through the chair, I actually don't know the percent. It wouldn't be hard for us to determine that using GIS, but I don't have that answer.
It didn't look like it was a lot.
It looks like, just eyeballing maybe about half of the areas. The smallest area is Mediterranean only, and then Craftsman and Mediterranean is another big chunk, and then contemporary, or I actually want to say it's all three styles in the blue. That's maybe about half.
Okay, well, altogether, the blues, but
Altogether,
I was thinking just the contemporary by itself, but there's really 6 styles here, right? Because there's 3 and then there's the
three
subtitles.
main, and each main has 2 subsets.
Subsets,
Correct.
and what's the difference between contemporary and industrial?
I will turn to our Mr. Pellegrini to talk more about that. He's more the expert.
Through the chair, yes, I think the question was the difference between industrial and contemporary styles. Is that correct? That's a very good question. And I want to say that when we use the term contemporary, it is a very broad brush that we're applying. So what's presented in here is a sort of narrower interpretation of contemporary that you would find acceptable for streamlined review, if that makes sense. So there absolutely is sort of a broader, more creative set of architectural outcomes that contemporary could provide, but this is sort of narrowing the window. When we mentioned sort of the industrial character, there is particular sub-area in the city where that's definable by sort of older warehouses, buildings that are sort of using a lot of metal, iron, you see exposed masonry, other elements that you don't see in other parts of the city. That was clearly valued, and it was important to sort of continue that. We heard a lot of support for the character of that district, and so the standards seek to continue that outcome.
And I'll just say one more thing and I'll stop. I was on the planning commission in West Hollywood for a lot of years, and man, you talk about Culver City. Somebody made a comment about Culver City having contemporary. I dreaded those contemporary things that came before us, for the most part. And the other thing is the courtyards. I mean, that's something we should be exploiting in this city. And in West Hollywood, believe it or not, they went to one extreme with the contemporary. The other extreme, they did great jobs in building out courtyards. So I think that's something that probably, we'll talk about it later, that probably needs to be fleshed out a little bit in this arts document of, what you can do with the courtyards. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Lodge?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I forget, I'm sorry I didn't bring this up earlier with an email, but I think it's shown on slide 16, but anyway, pages 44 and 48, the illustrations of neighborhood medium and neighborhood large, the pedestrian stripes don't align with the sidewalk. This is something that needs to be corrected. Okay. Let's see. My questions have been answered. But I just want to make it clear, Ms. Dicey, you are going to add other alternatives for the courtyards to the
Yes, Commissioner Lodge, through the chair. Again, since this courtyard issue came up and staff took a quick look at it this afternoon, we identified a way to clarify that courtyards could be internal to the building, sort of as shown in that comment letter from the public. So it's just a matter of a little bit of time for us to figure out exactly where to put that in. And at your direction, it could be something we amend.
Okay, so that would require a motion from the Planning Commission?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I do want to add my thanks to the others. This document, gosh, the hours that must have gone into it from staff and the public and so on, and it's amazing, the detail. And I guess you do have to nail it down if you're going to do you meet all these things, then you don't have to go through design review. But however, I think it was slide 39, just what can HLC, because of our charter, they have to go before HLC and ABR, but what's left that they're allowed to do? Or do they just have to be a rubber stamp?
Commissioner Lodge, through the chair, they need to confirm that the project complies with the objective standards. So staff will go through it, but ultimately ABR or HLC makes that call. Theoretically, there shouldn't be much to discuss because you either comply or you don't, but that's what they would be responsible for.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, and then I think there's a question for Mr. Pellegrini. The illustrations for, again, neighborhood, medium and neighborhood large, the drawings, and then also on page 73, the allowed site grading, these, well, and then the text says that these standards are intended to emphasize certain portions of the building and organize elements along the facade to provide visual rhythm and continuity along the streetscapes. The examples below certainly do show continuity, but a great deal of bulkiness and uninterest as far as I'm concerned. Is it just that you were showing the maximum that the buildings could go to?
Through the chair, thank you, Commissioner Lodge, for that question. The bulkiness in these diagrams is not intended to be regulatory, and so this is a general challenge in sort of illustrating where an objective standard, where we have an image to accompany something, but what's objective is pointed to the text and the objective language, the numerical standards that are provided. So the situation here where we're sort of showing buildings that actually are, could be perceived as being bulky, that is not sort of the outcome of these regulations. Specifically, it's an illustration.
Okay, because if that is the outcome, I don't find it Santa Barbara at all. And you mentioned in your comments that, you know, how there's a lot of variation in frontage in the city. And that's what I would hope to see continued, because that's part of what makes the city's architecture appealing. Okay. Okay. I guess those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Barnwell, followed by, oh, no, Commissioner Wardlaw, Vice Chair Wardlaw. Sorry, I skipped you.
Thank you, Chair Bauke. And thank you very much, staff. This is clearly a huge lift, and you guys have done an amazing job of really prioritizing this and taking a lot of the feedback from the last hearing. I have some basic questions, and then I have some bigger picture questions. So I'm going to start with basic questions on zoning. So do you guys think you could go back to the slide that shows the overall city with the different colors showing the mixed-use zoning versus the downtown edge zoning versus all those things? If not, I can just ask.
I apologize for flipping through these. It's just not going right to it.
No worries. I can
There
just
we go.
ask. I just may be wrong because
So
I'm
then-
not sure that I wrote
Can
it
it
all
be
down.
put up on the screen, please?
Okay, so I'm kind of colorblind, but if I'm looking at this correctly, the west side, near San Andreas, the white line is the 101, right? Okay.
Correct.
So right to the left of that, which is the west side, that color is neighborhood large, right?
Correct.
Not mixed-use corridor. So why would it not be mixed-use corridor around San Andreas?
That's likely because the underlying base zone is a more of the neighborhood large, which is a little bit not as intense as mixed-use corridor. It's also a transition area. If you can tell, the light yellow is also in that neighborhood, and the underlying zone for light yellow is R2. It's just the 2-unit zone. So it's sort of the scale of that neighborhood just doesn't quite meet the mixed-use corridor.
Okay.
Larger scale.
But it's based on the existing zoning below, it's not?
Correct.
Okay,
And the
that makes sense.
existing setting, what they observed, we observed is there now.
Okay, got it. And so then when we're talking about the architectural designs, which I'm now realizing is a totally different map, and I don't want to make you guys find it, but when we saw that earlier, it looked like the west side and the east side, actually, could we bring it up? The different zones that are allowed for the architectural styles. It looked like the west side and the east side were the predominant areas that allowed all architectural styles. And, I actually personally like the contemporary stuff, but I do understand that the contemporary design from an affordability perspective is, it's lower cost to build that. But it concerns me if, the predominant areas that are going to allow for these kind of more I don't want to say cheaply, but potentially cheaply or made developments are going to be, put mostly in the east side and the west side communities. I think it makes a lot of sense for it to be in the Funk Zone and on Haley Street and have the ability to do the contemporary kind of industrial look there because it makes sense for those communities. But for the west side and the east side, that's not the vibe in those areas, and it would be a change. And so why are we allowing that there, and we're not allowing it on the Upper East Side and, the surrounding downtown area?
Yeah, Chair Bauke and Commissioner Wardlow. So again, this was a result of public outreach and looking at our existing design guidelines, if they had any guidance for those areas. There are no design guidelines for the west side or east side neighborhoods at this time. And some of the input we got from the public, but this map is our map. And if Planning Commission wants to recommend changes to where styles are allowed, that's up to you, definitely.
Okay. Yeah, I'd really like to consider that because, as I said, I do like the contemporary look, but I get concerned that, if a developer is trying to build something and, the only areas that allow for this type of contemporary style that would be more probably cost effective to build at a larger scale than the contemporary, that then they start to pop up on the east side and the west side, where, to your point, we lack kind of design standards already. So I would hope that this document could kind of encourage the right type of development, and that these communities don't kind of get the less desirable, if again, that's just assuming that that's how the development world would shake it out. I just want to be protective of that and maintain, like, the east side has a great architectural feel over there. And so I'd love for maybe the commission to consider, if we wanted to adjust this map around, limiting it more.
And I'd also like to add real quick, because I remember when we first developed this, we were looking around our existing design guidelines to see if there was much mention of contemporary style, and it really just came up more for the Upper State Street area.
And I think it makes sense up there because we've already seemed to be doing that, right? There's a lot of that up there, and so that makes sense. Like I said, the Funk Zone and the Haley Street corridor I think are fine too, but it just kind of was noticeable that it would be in those two areas of town which are more lower income that would allow for more flexibility. And since we're so protective over Santa Barbara and the architectural design, I would think that kind of protection should go to all areas in the community, or more of them. Okay, that's my question about that. Then I had a question on, and I assume this is the same as the answer you gave me about the west side on mixed use, but why was the Funk Zone changed from the density of DE, the downtown edge, to the lower density of mixed use?
Yeah, so that was something that was mentioned last year when we met with your commission and were asked to take another look at the Funk Zone. And as staff, we also took a look at the lot sizes and the existing development, and we felt it was a valid comment to consider changing it from, I think it was downtown edge, to mixed-use corridor. It's also in the coastal zone, which has its own set of standards, but in any case, we got that recommendation last year and went ahead and thought it was a good idea.
Okay. Well, I don't want to go against other commissioners that may have recommended that in the past. I would just assume that, creating it, since next I'll get to kind of the comments on lack of flexibility, that having a higher density would allow for more flexibility, and then the developers can, they can figure it out. But by limiting it, is that necessary?
Oh, and actually, I do want to add, though, when you mentioned density, that's still per the general plan land use designation, so it doesn't really affect the density, it's more the intensity of the building.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the height limits are the same. Yeah, so they would all be 45 feet height limit. The difference between mixed-use corridor and downtown edge are not huge. There's a few differences with setbacks and things like that.
What's just a slight summary of what the differences are?
I think it's mostly setbacks. Oh, building types as well. So the downtown edge allows more of the block scale building types as opposed to mixed use corridor.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate that. and I don't really want to go into this, but I'm just curious, but why did we choose only 3 architectural options?
Yeah, Commissioner Wardlaw through the chair. Part of it was budget because we had a grant to pursue this project, and in order to develop, you probably noticed Chapter 6 is really detailed, and to build out 3 main groups with 2 substyles was sort of within the budget that we have. It also was, they did the existing conditions study, and these were the 3 most prevalent styles now, so.
And so if you wanted to do a Victorian house, then you just have to go through the other process?
Correct.
Okay, got it. Okay, well, I appreciate that. I think Commissioner Boss touched on this a little bit, but I just wanted to clarify. So in public comment, we got, a side-by-side comparison on a project of what it looks like in today's world and what it would look like under the odds framework. And there were some significant issues and problems that project would have faced. Did the city do those types of side-by-side comparisons with any projects? And if so, like which ones?
Yeah, Chair Balke and Vice Chair Wardlow. We had, through the work group, and as we were going through this process, we asked architects if they were able to help us do this process. It's something that staff didn't have the expertise to be able to carry through as well as architects did. And we were pleased to see these 2 letters that kind of at least partially went through the process, but we haven't sat down and done a full comparison of a city project and then how it would work out using the odds.
Okay. So based on city staff and our consultants that have expertise in this, are we feeling confident that the majority of projects, like specifically around the affordable projects, are going to be able to fit and use this process? Or are we doing, and I know that, clearly we're doing this in large part because the state is making us do this. And then our goal and hope is that this creates more predictability and streamlining for all projects. But it doesn't create more streamlining if people can't use it. So if we haven't done these types of analysis, where are we getting the confidence that this is going to work with the majority of projects? Specifically, what I'm most concerned about is the affordable projects in that. If affordable projects can't use this from a streamlining perspective, that would be super unfortunate. But it does sound like, I don't know where I was coming from, but it does sound like, based on the comments that you guys made earlier around the ability to use concessions and waivers, and that seemed to address some of the concerns that were mentioned previously around the affordable part specifically, but just how do we have a sense of how many projects are going to be able to use this?
Yeah, Vice Chair Wardlow, through the chair. How many projects will use it is hard to determine at this point. We are confident in that certain things that the city already allows or has in Title 30 are still the same as in Title 25. The height allowances, now the density. We're not restricting the number of units by building type. The setbacks are an open yard and things like that are essentially the same. These projects will still have to comply, for example, with solar excess height limitations, but that's the same for Title 30. So I'm pretty confident. I think the affordability of the project is not going to really play into it necessarily because as long as they're looking for a number of units and smaller unit sizes, they should hit that mark. So we won't know for sure until it's adopted and people start using it. There may be a reluctance just because it's different and challenging to use at first. But if it does provide that streamlined review process and they're only going to design review once, that's a cost saving right there. So.
Okay. And clearly you guys have done a lot of community engagement, and I really appreciate that. And I think there's a real concerted effort to get feedback from the public at large, obviously members of the commission, and that's very commendable. I wanted to get an understanding of did you guys do working groups with the developer community specifically and get their feedback? Because I saw the list of folks that were mentioned as part of the working groups and things. But what about the developers that really build these things? Have they sat down and said, yes, I would use this? Like this is, because remember, the part of the big discussion we keep having with the developers is about streamlining and about creating, a predictable path and all of those things. And so if, the city is going to use a lot of resources to get this right and do this in a way that's actually going to make a difference, I'd hope that we've had some discussions with developers that are saying, yes, this works, because it's a little concerning to get, letters from developers, especially, Brian Cornell's group, where, he does a lot of the development in this community. And if they have significant concerns, that's a little concerning. Obviously, I think you guys did a good job at addressing some of those concerns today, but just on a broad scale, like what has been the feedback from the development community?
Vice Chair Wardlow, so early on when this project was started, the Opticos did a number of interviews. I was not involved in them, but I helped set them up with focus groups or stakeholder groups, one of which was the developer community, so I can have Mr. Pellegrini speak to that. And then we have not specifically done outreach to the developer community in the sense of calling them up or convening a meeting throughout this outreach, but it has been widely publicized and out for review, and we're taking public comments, asked for people to send letters in, but I wouldn't say I specifically convened a meeting of just developer groups, but we did meet with the AIA multiple times to talk about this. Do you want to add anything, Mr.?
Is there a reason why we wouldn't have done that? Like, just wondering, because to me, that would be one of the biggest groups that we'd be trying to ensure are good with this, given they are the ones that would be using it.
No particular reason, just staff resources and time.
I'd love your thoughts.
Yeah, through the chair, thank you, Commissioner Wardlow, for the question. As Rosie mentioned, we did have a chance to sort of interface through sort of this focus group exercise. My memory is that there is sort of a sense that development in the city you need to be ready to go through the process with the city. It can take a while. There are sort of paths to projects, I think, and particularly in terms of the outcome, architectural style, maintaining sort of the quality of Spanish Revival, Mediterranean, that we're seen as being more predictable in terms of the outcome. So the idea of sort of establishing something, particularly in the area where, under the purview of the ABR, where there is just a more diverse set of projects that come in. There was, I think, some positive comment and discussion around sort of creating a structure for projects in that area that could be considered sort of for streamlined review, and increasing sort of the level of predictability that actually could happen in that area was absolutely something I think that we discussed. I would say that the time is sort of time is typically sort of what developers say is the largest lever in terms of sort of their success to getting to entitlements. So any path that they have to sort of shortening or making a more predictable outcome to approvals is a significant lever for them. I would hope that actually would result in desire to sort of use and elect to opt in to using this code.
Okay, thank you. I just have a couple more questions. So could you provide some examples of the procedures for allowing the minor deviations from certain standards? So like when I looked at and saw that if vehicle access parking needed to be between the buildings as opposed to in the back, would that be, that doesn't sound like a minor one. So if the developer said, no, it has to be this way for whatever reason, kind of similar to what we heard earlier about the courtyard example, is that something that like we can work with them on, or just because they decide that the parking has to be, not in the back, like per the way this is written, do they just have to go through the other process, or is there flexibility there?
Vice Chair Wardlow, through the chair. As far as the exceptions that are listed in Chapter 7, there's not flexibility for these ones because they're very specific things that can be adjusted for existing site condition reasons for most of them. When it comes to state density bonus waivers and concessions, that's a different process, and that's a little more flexible because they can, I'm not as familiar with density bonus and how it works, but my understanding is there's a certain number of waivers and concessions that can be requested in order to build what they need to build.
Right. Okay.
Oh, and Mr. Perez would like to add something to that?
Yeah, Commissioner Warlow. So, yes, Commissioner Warlow. Specifically, the exceptions, they're intended as things that happen or occur on a site that are beyond anybody's control. You know, like the tree's in the wrong spot, the utilities are in the wrong spot, the sidewalk isn't as wide as we thought, all those kinds of things. And so the exceptions are intended to address those issues as opposed to a design preference for a site plan by the developer, which is I think that's what you were asking, and the exceptions are not meant to deal with that.
Is exceptions the same thing as minor deviations? Because I was talking about the minor deviation. That's the same thing to you? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and-
That's helpful.
And just one other thing on state density bonus law. In terms of projects using the odds in the cities that we're working in California, the reality is that most applicants use state density bonus law, not because they don't want to do the odds, though. I want to make that's a huge nuance, that it's not because they think the odds are onerous. It's because the waivers and concessions allow them to just do what they want to do. And it's not that there's any malice there, it's just, it's way easier. So even if you had super easy odds, what is happening in most cities is they're still using the state density bonus law because they get to waive standards as allowed by the law, and then in addition to that, they get a bonus in yield.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, guys. My last question is just to follow up on the, one of the pieces that were mentioned in public comment, the no net loss law. I assume, what is staff's position on that? I assume it's that if the project was going to be substantially not able to meet the amount of units that they'd originally thought they could, then they would just go through the subjective process so it doesn't violate the no net loss?
Vice Chair Wardlow, so projects should be able to meet their density, and in fact, we have an exception that if they're unable to meet it, they can get an increase in number of stories or height in order to meet their density they would be allowed under general plan. So I don't think we have an issue with that.
That's great. All right, I think that's the remainder of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioner Barnwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I agree with almost everything that's been said. And so in a brief review of those things, I was a surveyor myself professionally for several years, and there was nothing more difficult than determining top of bank. And I think that surveyor's comments should be looked at and, kind of tighten that up a little bit. It's a very dense document, and I can't imagine writing it. I'm a writer, and it just looks like the pietà to me. I mean, I don't know how in the world you got the thing done. And here we are picking away at it a little bit. As a general contractor, I looked at this and thought, I have no way to tell how it's going to play out. And then we had two professional architects come up and give us two examples of how it's not going to play out all that great. I shouldn't say not all that great, but it's not going to play out kind of the way we thought. And several people have mentioned, and I'm quoting here, we won't know for sure until people start using it. That's great, but once we turn it into black letter code, and then people go out and start using it, and it is not working quite the way we want, how easy do we get to bring it back and change that black letter code? Because Santa Barbara is known as being tremendously hidebound. And I would hate to see this document, which we're now here thinking it's a living document. We're being told that. We're kind of waiting to see how it plays out. Once we see how it plays out, how easily are we going to be able to make changes?
Commissioner Barnwell, through the chair. Honestly, the changes would be the same process that we go through now to change code. So it would have to go through Planning Commission, Ordinance Committee, and City Council for adoption. So changes would go through that process, which takes time.
Well, maybe it isn't just so much the time, but with what vigor will we respond and set that up? Because we know we're understaffed. So there's a part of this that, you want to review it again. You want to make some tweaks in it. But then you realize, just what you said, it's got to go out there before we're going to really see what these mistakes are. Or not mistakes, but what these concern areas are. And I'm worried that it'll be years before we are able to make the corrections that I wish we could make right here today. And I don't know how we solve that. I'm just telling you that's one of my concerns. Is it, I don't even know how this would work, but is it possible that there is something in this document that addresses specifically affordable housing? So that there's a heading almost that's affordable housing. And as Mr. Frederick said, they can easily go there and see what these things are and what these exceptions are. Because wading through all of this sort of stuff is daunting. Even the architects said it was daunting to do. And I think this planning commission, if we all have one thing we share in common, it's affordable housing. And so however we can make that easy on the applicant, I think will be getting us where we want to go. And I don't even necessarily want to pick this document apart. I have several places, but just in general, whatever we can do to ease that process. I haven't yet heard, and I'd like someone to tell me, why are we setting up architectural styles in these neighborhoods? Isn't it okay in that way it is now? I mean, insofar as streamlining things, I'm not so sure that architectural style helps to streamline it. The architect comes in with a design, so why are we even fiddling around with designs, other than in the Old Town?
Commissioner Barnwell, through the chair. The architectural styles, it's kind of an interesting question because I do know some communities have adopted this form-based code without styles. Our dilemma is in our city, for one thing, we have the El Pueblo Viejo Landmark District that dictates styles, so we knew right away we have to at least address that issue and do limit styles in certain areas of the city. The other reasons were more based on, again, our existing setting and concerns you've heard today from people about contemporary styles. So if we didn't have or other styles that might not fit in with our city. So if we didn't dictate style, it would be pretty wide open. People would still work with this document for form and building placement. But the styles allow us to talk about materials, which I think is very important to this community, that quality materials are used in architecture and all those little details that are really important to people in our community. So what I've heard through the work group and through working on objective design standards before this for Senate Bill 35 is those details matter. So I think that's why we do styles in our community.
Okay, well, I'm not sure I 100% agree because there's many conventional architectural styles that are nice. And I don't necessarily want them to be in Pueblo Viejo, but I do support the idea of taking the Mediterranean style on Milpa Street with the foundational concept that the gateway locations that provide access to the city should have those. I support that idea, and those are like Milpas and Garden and a few other places. Except Garden happens to be more industrial. Excuse me, but I had a couple other things that I was curious about. We cavalierly refer to bicycle parking. And at the meeting that we had with the city council a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about a whole variety of design issues. Councilman Mike Jordan brought it up. and I think it's worth talking about. There's a revolution in the design of bicycles. And I don't know that our code has addressed that. And particularly that some of those bicycles are the size of motorcycles. And we're the planning commission, right? We're not the old commission. We're the what's going to happen commission. And if you go down on State Street, you see what bicycles are doing by the thousands. So I would suggest that we could beef up some of our conversation in this, particularly in the, is it the Title 30 section? Yeah, where we're talking about bicycles.
I will ask Ms. Grant to come
Ms. Grant,
speak to that.
Yes, good afternoon, Commissioner Barnwell, through the chair. So bicycles, most of what's in the odds framework refers to vehicular parking and bicycle parking in the city's access and parking standards. So that's where we find all the standards for bicycles. I think what we envisioned is an update for those guidelines probably coming soon.
Okay.
And we do have in that clause for bike parking, especially with the targeted for multifamily and in commercial development, is please anticipate that you need to provide bike parking to meet all different types of bikes. As you said, it looks very different on our network now with cameras. We're seeing about 50% split with like e-bikes now on our network, and then the conventional bikes. Some of the bikes that you mentioned too that we're seeing are not they're not bicycles. They're classified as they're not under that by the state definition. So, but bottom line is those are certain sources or mobility that we need to be able to accommodate in housing development.
Okay, so this document isn't really where we do the
No, it would be
changes.
the broader, and we're also working on overhauling all of our bike racks citywide that's in our
Yeah.
public right-of-way. We'll be going to the Historic Landmark Commission soon on those. So we're in the ripe timing for some
Okay.
minor updates for that.
This document does refer, however, to, it goes into some detail about electric plug-in stations for electric cars, but all those bikes plug in. Are we going to talk about electric plug-ins for bicycles in this document, or does that come somewhere else?
That's a good question. I think that's, beyond the details for odds, I'd like it probably to still live in the access and parking
Okay.
standards.
Well, let's keep
with
thinking
that.
about that, too, when we're talking about bicycles.
A little bit different is that the most of the batteries detach. Not all bicycles, but a lot of them do. And so a lot of them are charged either in a garage or within the house or place of business.
Again, I don't know all those details, but we want to think about what all
Yes,
those details actually are.
absolutely.
And I want to agree with Commissioner Wiscombe's remarks about that ADA space and whatever concepts we were trying to say in that paragraph, that we rework that so we get where we want to be.
Yes, it's always, I think when we're writing ordinance language or design guidelines, someday it makes complete sense. And then when you reread it again, it's like, oh, we need to modify that. So thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe, for your comment, because we already went back and we started to write it. We just want to confirm the rewritten language with the Building and Safety Department.
Okay. I think it's a very good document. I like it. It needs some tweaks. I want to compliment you all on your hard work. I can't imagine what it was like. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Wiscombe, followed by Commissioner Lott.
Thank you. Could someone else go first? I just want to look at something
Sheila will
again.
go
Thank you.
next.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This arose out of the questions that Commissioner Wardlaw was asking. For Mr. Pedrini, how long has an odds ordinance been in effect in any of the cities? What's the longest that any of them have been in effect in the cities you've worked with? And do you have any idea of how they've worked out and how popular they are?
Yeah, thank you, through the chair, Commissioner Lodge. I mentioned a sort of broader history with jurisdictions adopting form-based codes and streamlining review processes. That started happening in California in the late 1990s. I think the earliest codes were adopted 1999, 2000, and they have been used continuously to guide development in sub-areas of cities for that period of time. Personally, I was involved in codes that applied form-based zones to particular geographies, similar to what you see here, that have been in place since 2006, 2007, and have basically reviewed and approved development projects, very conventional cities, infill development through FBCs for a long period of time. As I mentioned, cities that are meeting the objective design standards requirements under new state law, most of those have now been adopted in the last 4 to 5 years. So we see a shorter time frame for projects that are coming in under those requirements.
Okay, so what has been the level of use? Are they successful in providing developers a different path?
Through the chair, I would say that our experience is that there is housing development being proposed, or mixed use with housing being proposed sort of across the state. We can see high numbers of development applications coming in. The vast majority of what we see are SB 330, SB 35 projects that are electing to use the state density bonus program. And so they are applying, they are typically applying odds, to Mr. Perez's point, and asking for waivers and concessions as part of their application process. One point I sort of want to make there is that what we hear time and time again is that developers want to do what is understood to be the right thing. They have strong interest in doing development and returning to communities to do more development. And to Mr. Perez's point, they are electing to use a state density bonus law because they get the waivers and concessions. And so where the odds are communicating the intent of the design outcome clearly, I think there is a reflection in that. You get projects that are asking for waivers and concessions, but they are also seeking to demonstrate clear compliance with the intent of the standards, to use a term that was used today. And the clarity, I think, in the odds is important for that reason. It helps carry that through to respond to sort of the unprecedented situation that we are in with losing local control.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Commissioner Wiscombe, I believe.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to go back to the exceptions for 1 minute. And I just, Vice Chair Wardlow just let me look at how those tables are set up. But I understand that we're talking about objective considerations, exceptions. But could we add a category? You talked about adding possibly the closed courtyard, and instead of doing that, could we just add a category that was a project-specific consideration, a very general one, and then, the finding the finding for it would be, if it were approved, would be that it's a minor adjustment to, or something like that. But I just feel like we need to broaden that a little bit for flexibility's sake.
Commissioner Wiscombe, through the chair, the difficulty is that flexibility is inconsistent with objective standards. And so all of the exceptions have to have a criteria that is clearly objective in order for these to be objective guidelines. And so that's where existing site conditions is identified as one of the reasons, and it calls out what those types of things are. But
Well,
a
if you
a lot
added-
of these were written a little more generally like that, and it was something that we had to change because we needed to make them objective. So offhand, I can't think of a way to kind of get at what you're trying to get at, but with including an objective way to get there.
Well, so a project-specific consideration is not, is subjective, is what you're saying? Or the decision on that is subjective? It's the category. It's not it's that you can't possibly know all the categories of exceptions. I'm getting, Mr. Pellegrini, you're nodding at me. Is that good or bad? Are you shaking your head no, or is that yes?
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, there are real constraints to what we can do here, and sort of when we need to provide objective criteria and not kick into a discretionary process. And so it could be a situation where when an applicant is making the decision to use this code versus the discretionary code, they would look at this section and understand if they can present something that needs more discussion or not. And if they are not within sort of the umbrella that Section 2507 provides, then that actually may be grounds for them to basically kick over into the discretionary process. And in those situations, the review boards would have the ability to provide more guidance and opinion about the outcome of the design.
Okay, so I'm just going to pursue this for another minute because you're talking about adding possibly a closed courtyard per Ms. Perron's dilemma with her project. And that to me, where do you draw the line between objectivity and, I think if you added a project-specific consideration, that you could make a decision that, no, this is not an objective exception, it's a subjective exception, and therefore we can't consider it. But I just think that this exceptions category is just far too narrow.
Commissioner Wiscombe, through the chair, I just want to clarify, going back to the courtyard discussion, we're not suggesting we make it an exception. We're actually suggesting we change the building type just where it talks about courtyards and allowing it as an interior courtyard. So that's one thing. It wouldn't be in Chapter 7, it would be in Chapter 4, I believe, under that large courtyard building type. So that's one thing. And then again, I have to agree with Ms. DeBusk. It's really, to be an objective process, we had to choose the things that we thought people might need an exception for based on site conditions and lay them all out. If it's something outside of this, they would need to go through a different process.
Okay, I'm going to just cross that off my list then and forget about it. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to say that, as I understand it from what Ms. Dicey said before, if the Planning Commission approves a motion to allow interior-facing courtyards, that solves the problem.
Yeah, Commissioner Lodge, through the chair. Yeah, if your motion is, because when we get to the end of this, we need to hear from you what changes you would like to recommend. So that could be a recommended motion to amend the building type to allow interior courtyards.
Commissioner DeLuccio.
I don't know about the exceptions. If we start doing exceptions, then it doesn't become odds, does it?
Yeah, Commissioner DeLuccio, through the chair. Yeah, I mean, we want to allow some flexibility. So we looked at specific things like where the parking is located or the size of your design site and things that we felt like there's probably a site condition that maybe we can be a little flexible about and specific about how flexible we are too. It's like, 12 inches or 10% of the standard. It all has to be laid out in black and white.
And we'll give you direction to address the courtyard, which I think you have a solution for that now. I have a question, but SB 330 and SB 35, that has to do with the state bonus densities. Now, currently, how is that addressed? Obviously, we only have subjective right now, but how do we address those with all the waivers and everything? That's gone through, does it go through subjective or around it? How do we approve those projects?
Commissioner DeLucia through the chair. So you're kind of mixing up different state laws. Senate Bill 35 is very specific for a streamlined ministerial approval process for projects that qualify. I think they have to have 10% affordability and a bunch of other qualifications. So they aren't bonus density is like a separate process.
So they can go through staff for approvals?
Yes, so if a project, we haven't processed a Senate Bill 35 project yet that I'm aware of, but if they do come in, then they would be reviewed per state law and through the objective design standards that we adopted a couple years ago. These are intended to replace those. So when these get adopted, this will be what people use for
They'll go
Senate
through
Bill
the odds.
35. Yeah.
They'll go through the odds for SB
Correct.
35 and SB 330?
But bonus density is a different, that could be a market rate project, it could be, any project can.
Yeah, it gets confusing. I'm sorry,
And I don't know-
I don't have it straight.
Am I correct in all this, Ms. Ostringer? I want to make sure I'm not mixing state laws up.
No, you've got it pretty much right, the SB.
I think we need orientation on that. Maybe we have these lunches, maybe we need a lunch on this, on all these state,
Mr.
laws.
Perez would love to add something to this?
Yeah.
Yeah, Commissioner DeLucia, I want to go back to the exceptions. Just to share with you, you all have been asking about our experience and what we've seen, what works, what doesn't work. So report from the trenches on this. We've seen cities on the issue of exceptions or topic of exceptions actually do one of two things. Either what you're doing, trying to determine and understand the kinds of needs that projects have and the kinds of findings that can be objectively written for those needs. And then the opposite. Nope, if they don't meet the standards, they go discretionary. They go to the subjective path. It's either one of two.
Yeah, got it. And then some things are done through the staff level. I'm not trying to confuse everything, but, so currently, basically, it's been right now subjective. It's either subjective or they've gone through staff to get what they needed.
Yeah, just to be clear, they're either doing the kind of exceptions that you're being proposed with right now, presented with, or the attorneys in those cities are saying, no, we don't even want to go that route. If they do not meet the objective standards, they have elected by not meeting them to go through the discretionary path.
But currently, it's, behind this whole theory is streamlining, correct? Yes. That's probably the major
That's correct.
thing about all this. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I am going to sort of do a little transition between commentary of my case and questions first, but then sort of go into the comment period for the rest of the commission. Couple comments, and being one of the folks that was on the working group, there was a lot of discussion about contemporary as a style type. And to address Commissioner Barnwell's comment, how I look at this is, and as somebody that's been working with form-based codes for 25 years, is in a city context, the reason why you have styles is this is supposed to be the pathway in which something just shows up in a neighborhood. There isn't really a whole lot of public process, there's not going to be a whole lot of public notice. It will just appear basically because the only other official act is an architectural review board's consent calendar item. So this stuff is just going to show up. So if it's something that's just going to show up in your community, it better be something in which the community finds to be the character or what would be considered normal for that neighborhood. And that's, I think, the conversation we had at the working group. Is the Mediterranean style surely is something everybody knows Santa Barbara for. And then there's a lot of craftsman in the east and west side that also could show up and nobody would have an issue. We wouldn't have a political backlash or something like that. It's when it comes to the contemporary, I agree with one of the public commenters, which also was a member of the ODS working group, is the contemporary is going to be an issue that the community is going to have to address. I mean, the Upper State Street area, La Cumbre Plaza, I think the community's accepted that is something that's work. But the idea of contemporary just popping up in the east and west side randomly without a public process, I think is a fool's errand, honestly. So I'm of the opinion that we should seriously have a conversation about the contemporary. We had it at the committee. I think this body needs to have that discussion of whether contemporary is something that we should just expect to show up in neighborhoods and not expect the community to react to that negatively. I'd like to thank the staff. They've done a great job. Opticos has done a great job. And I did get, there were different conversations about having this document be more flexible, as somebody's had to go to court with a major merchant builder and describe with a city hand in hand to make sure something actually complies. You don't want to leave anything gray. It's got to be black and white. It has to be black and white to stand up, or you will be having folks that will want to litigate this. So what my suggestion is, yes, it's a long document. It's a long document for a reason so that it can be complied with. And if you comply with it, you get a very quick path, which should accelerate the affordability of some of these projects, because our process is long and cumbersome. So that's something I think is important. This does that, and that's what the state's looking for. So we have this situation of where a community has had a very, very long period of time with very serious design review board chops. We're very, very blessed in that. It's embedded into the charter too. And you know, that's why Santa Barbara looks the way it is. So unfortunately, the state's given us a situation. We have to do something else. And so having these rules and regulations by style types is very important to be able to meet those objectives. So I'm going to put that out there. I'll open it up for sort of a commentary and a question. And the only other question is, it seems to me that Opticos could surely come up with a way to address on the courtyards. I mean, there could be a C courtyard version or internal. There are other versions of courtyard types that could be embedded into this. And I think that seems to be the consensus of most of the members of the commission, that we could just put that in the document. But I think we need to seriously talk about some of these other sort of bigger picture conversations. But the document itself, I think, does its job of what it's been tasked to do. Yes, it would have been nice to do some other styles, honestly. And I wanted to see the Victorian done. Unfortunately, you know, there wasn't a budget for that. So with that, I'll take whoever would like to start on the comment and consideration. Commissioner Wiscombe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your hard work on the committee. I think the whole committee did a great job, and I'd like to thank everyone that worked on it. I took quite a few notes during this. I guess I am compelled to agree to remove contemporary on the east side and west side. I think that was Vice Chair Wardlow's argument, and I will go with that. Other things, I think we all agree that the definitions that are specific to ODDS should be moved to ODDS, so we have a definition section. Clarify the allowance of the state bonus density waivers, clarify that they apply in the ODDS document. and change the community open space, change the plaza of 50 by 50 to some sort of, something that's more flexible, even though I'm starting not to like that word in this meeting. You know, that maybe gives them one minimum dimension and then gives us square footage or something. Top of the bank, tighten that definition. I think we talked about that. Amend the building type to include the interior courtyard. We talked about that. I think it was Commissioner Wardlow or Commissioner Boss talked about prioritizing affordable housing. I don't know how you do that in this document, but if there's a way to do that, or if they can go to if they're using ODDS as a affordable housing developer, perhaps they go to the head of the line over other people. I don't know if you can do that, but that would be one thing to look at, possibly. So those are the things that I heard that I got the courtyard. I talked about the courtyard, yeah. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, okay. I just wanted to add some general comments that I greatly appreciate the transparent process, and it included a lot of people who really worked hard on this. It does produce clear, objective, measurable standards. With the document we saw back in July of 2023, really did have some subjectivity in it, and that's clearly been removed. I love the fact that it's pedestrian-oriented standards that keep our city special, attractive, and livable. I think the goals were commendable. Mr. Fredericks read them all off, and I think that they were really great goals. The quick code guide checklist is an excellent tool that at least allows you to know where you're going to, if it's Title 25 or Title 30, to find what you need to find. I think, as Mr. Dordan said, this document should be in the best interest of the community, so it needs to be stricter rather than looser, and I would agree with that. And I look forward to seeing the 10-page checklist for using the document. And I think, I think we should have some sort of, just as another thought, we should have some sort of a review process with coming back to Planning Commission at some stage, in terms of, because I think we need to have flexibility in how this document works, because there'll probably be some issues to iron out. So I don't know what that timeline looks like, but it will be, once it gets adopted, I think, it'll have to be probably a couple years before we bring it back and see, or maybe it's a number of projects. Maybe that's how we do it rather than a number of years. That might be a good way to look at it. And I think those are all my comments. So, but some of them I think would be helpful to be incorporated into a motion when we get there. Thank you.
Thank you,
Chair
Commissioner.
Bauke, if I
Yes.
could just interrupt, would it be, I hate to interrupt during deliberations, but it would be possible to take a quick break for staff to
Sure.
stretch and just get back into
We're
it?
just trying to get through this.
I know.
Yeah, no problem. We'll take a 5-minute break.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lodge was next to provide commentary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I fully agree with the comments about removing contemporary from the east and west side. Actually, if I had my way, I'd eliminate it everywhere. There's some contemporary that I like, but most of it, when I've moved around the community and I see it, it jars me. It just doesn't fit in Santa Barbara, what the tradition we have established here.
Okay, Commissioner Warlow.
Thank you, Chair. So first, yes, a huge thank you to staff and to everyone who's been working so hard on this. This is obviously a massive lift, very, very detailed document. I want to say ditto to literally everything that Commissioner Wiscombe said. So I think we're going to kind of encapsulate those comments for at least for me, but I think for a lot of us. And then the only other thing I wanted to add/ask is, so understanding that we haven't done outreach to the development community, and kind of given the discussion that happened today around just this one specific instance around this courtyard, that then we're now changing things because we learned from the developer that, like, you know, this whole discussion that we've had, that's made a real impact. So is there an opportunity that, I know this is going to come back to us is my understanding, so is there an opportunity for the city to try to meet with some developers to just go through a few projects and identify some more of these kind of nuanced situations like what came up with this courtyard thing? Because to someone's point on the commission, it's likely, you know, for this to come, once this is implemented, it's real hard to come and change it again, right? And so, like, if we learned a lot just from one public comment and one, you know, back and forth on that specific project, I'm sure there are many other examples where because it just as, you know, a couple developers have come up to me saying that they had a lot of concerns about this document, and that, you know, and I tried to get them, I said, right, public comment, you know, all that stuff. But, you know, I don't think that they're spending the time, because I don't know that they believe that it's really going to be listened to. And so I think if the city made a concerted effort to reach out to a few of the, you know, large scale developers that we see here all the time and say, hey guys, we really, you know, come forward and let's go through a few of your projects and see how could you do a little analysis where you line up how it is today versus how it would be under this project, so that we could just proactively make these tweaks. It sounds like staff is willing to make those tweaks to address the courtyard issue. Maybe it's not that difficult to just make some of these tweaks proactively, so that we don't end up with developers just saying, this doesn't work for us. Because that would really defeat the whole purpose of this, minus the fact that we're now in compliance with state law. But hopefully we're doing this for the right reasons of actually using it. So that would be my only request. And other than that, really ditto to everything that Commissioner Wiscombe said. And then I think she touched on this, on the affordability piece. Obviously, really want to see that affordable projects can use this, obviously making it very clear around the ability to use state waivers and all of that in conjunction with this. But anything else we could do, so maybe a specific meeting with Rob I mean, I'm sure you guys have done that. You've met with Rob Fredericks on this, right?
Commissioner Wardlow, yes, at the stakeholder outreach was, Rob Fredericks was included in the beginning of the project.
And maybe it's just a one-on-one meeting with the Housing
Yeah,
Authority
I'd be happy to
just
do that.
go through a couple of those projects just to make sure there's not some of these other specific instances that we could have just proactively addressed now.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
Okay, that would be really great. That's all I got. Thank you all very, very much.
Commissioner Wiscombe, followed by Commissioner Barnwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, that was exactly my comment, Vice Chair Wardlow. I was thinking, I wrote it down, how about the Housing Authority, question mark? And I think that would be good, because I know you met with Habitat for Humanity, but I think that would be that would just be a loop back to close that loop before we see this again. And I also wanted to add that to my list of things that I think should probably be in the motion, that we retain the 90-year affordable housing covenant in Title 30. We struck it out for some reason, and so we should put it back in there wherever it belongs. And those are my other two comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Barnwell, followed by Commissioner DeLuccio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to reiterate mostly for my own self, but maybe for the staff. I agree with what Commissioner Wiscombe listed, and it was remove the contemporary design from east side, west side, move definitions that are applicable into the document, clarify the bonus density waivers, change the plaza size as per the discussions, look at the top of bank issue, the interior courtyard issue as we discussed, the priority for affordable housing. I think everybody's talking about that. How do we make it easier for that? And then I concur, retain the 90-year covenant. And may I ask our legal counsel, what happens at the end of 90 years?
I haven't been here since that happened. Chair Bauke, Commissioner Barnwell, the way that at least the ownership covenants work is when the property's sold and an ownership, a new 90-year covenant is recorded, so the 90 years keeps going. The rental is, units are different, so when 90 years passes, then the covenant will just expire and they can be rented at market rate.
So we're setting up our community for 100 years from now, not having a whole bunch of affordable units.
Well, if the AUD continues and people are using the AUD, then there will be, as the projects come in, they're required to have affordable 90-year covenants on them. So as more projects come in, more affordable units will be added in, 90 years.
But they do expire, though.
They do expire after 90 years. Occasionally, I've seen projects that have utilized housing funds from the city where we've given them loans for rehabilitation, in which case then we usually ask them to re-sign a new 90-year covenant.
All right. Thank you. And then one last question to Mr. Pellegrini, is that correct? You had said, I think, looking at the two different pathways, one of them is the old style and then one of them is the ODDS. Your experience with other communities was that even if the developer did go to the old style, he honored the spirit of the ODDS. Is that did you say that?
Through the chair, yes, I did.
Okay, so that's one benefit, whether they use it or not. What we're doing here is setting up a framework that whether or not it's being used, it will be in the thought processes of the developers and the community as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Commissioner DeLucia.
I think we're starting to say the same thing over and over again. I actually ditto everything that Commissioner Wiscombe said, so I'm fine with all that. Especially excited about removing some of the contemporary in the east and the west, and also that we're going to further address the courtyard. So those were a couple of my concerns here. And as far as I think, and after that, I think it's going to get to a point where I know what I like about the city in the way we scrutinize everything in a long, for a long time. However, I think it's about time we move forward with this. I know it's going to probably come back to us in a couple of weeks, and then I think the next step would be, obviously we're going to see if people use it, and that's where we're really going to be able to see how we can improve on it in a couple of years, because we can have a meeting, which I agree with developers. But there's always going to be things that are going to come up. And I think we just need to get moving on it. And then again, then eventually it could become we should have something that they report back to the Planning Commission as part of the direction. And then we can, at some point, maybe we'll require an amendment down the road. So.
Okay, Commissioner Ward-Rojo. You beat me. Go ahead. Okay.
But hopefully that you guys are going to meet with the developers and proactively identify some of those things so that we don't have to come, because I'm skeptical of our ability to come back and amend this, because we have all these different projects. There are so many housing element priorities that I know that staff is working on that I'm eagerly excited to see. And so I don't want to be adding on more what we're doing right now to then say, oh, we're going to do this again in 2 or 3 years. Like, in reality, I feel like in 2 or 3 years, we're still going to be dealing with the other housing element pieces still. So my hope is that we can try and get this as right as possible. And I really think that meeting with the developers and sketching out a couple of these example projects would be helpful to start to address some of those proactively. I know that's a really short timeline, given this is coming back in a couple weeks, but I'm hopeful that, our development community will step up and want to participate. If you guys just do some general outreach to people and say, come with your, here's what's happening now, here's what would happen here, and that could hopefully make a big difference in us proactively addressing this stuff.
Yeah, can I just reply real quick, Vice Chair Wardlow? I'll do my best to make that happen. It is a very tight time frame, and a lot of people are on vacation this time of year. I just want to clarify when you say developer community, because we have been meeting with architects, but you're speaking more specifically of contractors, or what do you mean when you?
I think both. So I'm happy that you're meeting with the architects. I think that's great. So that community as well as other developers. So like the folks that are doing, like as an example, like Matt Taylor is doing the Upper State Street, right? Like he's a developer. So like some people like that are like in the weeds on like how this project does or doesn't work. Like the people that come before the commission and say, this doesn't pencil out, right? Like, let's make sure that those people see this as, okay, I can use this, because if they say they can't, then then what are we all doing?
And just one other little point I want to make, because it's been popping up in my head. As far as affordability goes, we do have separate programs in the housing element to address affordability, as you well know. So that's, even if you don't see what you want to see through this process, or it may not be the appropriate venue, there is a follow-up housing element program to work on that as well.
Yes, which is exactly why I hope we can get this one right, so we can focus on those, because those are super important. So thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Barnwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know you're anxious to get to your part, but how is the staff going to track the glitches in this once it becomes black letter code? And are we going to take comments from the construction community and then keep track of those things so that we will know what it is that we need to tweak? Because that's an important component of correcting this.
Yes, Commissioner Barnwell, through the chair. I would imagine through the development review process that we normally have, the planners that work closely with plan checks and taking in applications would be the ones who could track, hey, we keep seeing this one thing not working out, and we make a note of it.
Well, but that's more anecdotal than it is formal. It seems like when those comes up, whoever the planner is, they should say, okay, let's add this to the list. That's part of the process, is adding it to the list rather than having it be anecdotal and say, gosh, we're having trouble with that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I know that, for example, for amendments to Title 30, we've had a long-going list of we need to correct things.
Okay.
So it could be something like that where we keep a running tally.
Okay. Thank you. And lastly, on the question of affordability, this is not going to produce affordable housing per se in the market. When the finished retail house is finished, or condo or whatever, they're going to go for a market rate, not an affordable rate, because the developer is just going to get the extra money. But it will improve the trust relationship between us and builders. And I think that has been badly damaged, and this would be really an excellent thing for everyone to know what is going to happen. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. The only comment I had, follow-up, is first of all, I agree with the list Commissioner Wiscombe and Commissioner Barnwell have outlined. The only comment I have, and this is probably a question to Dan, is about reporting back. Would you have an objection of just a staff report coming back in a year after adoption, just to say, here's what we're finding, not necessarily hard detail, but at least some kind of feedback loop?
Chair Balke, I think that's a good idea. This is new. We need to keep an eye on it. We need to build trust in odds. So I think it's a good idea to come back. And while I have the mic, we're going to lose Mr. Pellegrini in a few minutes at 4:30. So if anyone has questions for him, and there were a couple items. I know there's not a motion on the table yet or anything, but a couple items I think we could focus on. One, where East Side and West Side is for contemporary, if that does make it into the motion, and the other plaza dimensions in area.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so what I'm going to ask is for Commissioner Wiscombe to offer a motion giving direction to staff to bring back all these different amendments and changes to the code for the courtyard and the whole list that she has. And I believe Mr. Barnwell mentioned all that list, plus maybe one more. So let's do that and see if we can get that motion adopted and give you direction, and so we can move this forward.
Okay, thank you. Do we have the recommendation for the, because I know we have to do the, it's got like 5 parts or something. There it is. Okay, so the motion is to amend the Santa Barbara Municipal Code to add Title 1025 Objective Design and Development Standards, and then amend Santa Barbara Municipal Code chapters, and I won't go through them all, but they're in Title 30, pertaining to process and other regulations for objective design and development standards and to implement zoning ordinance cleanup items. Okay, there's more, yep. And determine that objective design and development standards in Title 30 amendments are categorically exempt from environmental review pursuant to CEQA guidelines, minor CEQA guidelines, period, as staff has written here. And then determine that objective design and development standards in Title 30 amendments are consistent with the general plan. Is that it? That's it, right? Yeah, okay. I couldn't remember if there were 4 or 5. Okay, and then pertaining to the motion, adding that definitions that are specific to ODDS be moved to a definitions section in ODDS. And while I'm on definitions, that we add the, I think I said this as an earlier comment, I didn't say it in this, but on the, where is it? Ms. Deisty, you got this down because I watched you write it down and you nodded that you would add it. Table 250104OA, general plan land use designations correlated to ODDS zones. But you've used the lettering only, so will you please add a footnote of what they are? Yeah, okay, great. So definitions. Number 2, clarify that the state bonus density waivers are allowed to apply in ODDS. Next one is in community open space, change the plaza 50 by 50 minimum to something that's more flexible by adding a dimension in one direction and a square footage minimum. Next one is remove the contemporary from the east side and the west side. Next one is top of bank, tighten the definition. The next one is, if possible, prioritize affordable housing. I don't know if that can be done, but that might be something that you look at to see if it can be. The next one is amend the building type to include an interior courtyard. Retain the 90-year affordable housing covenant in Title 30. Meet with the housing authority, who's a developer, to determine if there are other tweaks to ODDS before it comes back to us. And report back to the Planning Commission. Chair Bauke said 1 year. I don't know if that gives us enough time. I was thinking actually maybe 18 months or 2 years, or after X amount of projects that have used this, whichever comes first. I don't want to give too much time, because if we're seeing one project in 18 months, then we have a you have a project, I don't know X projects, I don't know what X is, but something that's, fairly realistic, something that gives us a, red flag, we need to do some more work on this. So whatever that happens to be, I think that's something that staff has to give thought to. So maybe X months or after X number of projects that use this, whichever comes first, where when you come back to us, X is filled in.
Yes. You fill in the X,
I think 18
okay?
is probably,
Okay.
Adoption.
yeah, 18 months after, yeah, all of this is after adoption. And did I miss anything? I think that concludes my motion unless someone has another amendment to it, but.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a
Sorry, just to be clear, did your motion include returning back to Planning Commission on a specific date? Or are you recommending to City Council?
No, oh, I'm sorry, we are not, no, it's coming back, I think Chair Bauke wants it to come back to us, so.
So we can see the maps. 'cause
Yeah,
again,
on-
I don't
okay,
want to
then
see
can
this
you
where the definitions are, yeah.
Oh,
Can we include
okay,
August 29th in your
Return
motion?
to the Planning Commission on, is it August 29th? Special meeting to review the amendments in the motion.
We have a motion and a second, so we just need a vote whenever she
second.
stops typing. No, Sheila seconded it.
Thank you, Chair Bauke. I'll take roll call vote. Commissioner Wiscombe?
Yes.
Commissioner Boss?
Yes.
Commissioner DeLucia?
Yes.
Commissioner Lodge?
Yes.
Commissioner Barnwell?
Yeah, yes.
Vice Chair Wardlow?
Yes.
Chair Bauke?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you all, and we'll give you guys a minute to scurry out. We have a couple little administrative items left to do. So, where's that? All right, we're on to the administrative agenda, committee and liaison reports. Does Commissioner Boss have a staff officer liaison report?
No, no report.
No report. Other committees and liaison reports. Do we have any other commissioners have a report from any of the bodies that they are liaisons to? I don't see anybody jumping to that. Okay, so I have no items for discussions or subcommittees and workshops, even though Mr. DeLuccio noted that we might want to have a workshop sometime on all the things that the folks in Sacramento do to us as far as changes in the law. So let's make a note of maybe putting that on an agenda someday when appropriate, and maybe wait until after, well, September's coming soon, and that's when they come up with a whole new set of additional bills to add. So I'll let council think about whether she wants to do it before they have another pile to address. With that, I'd like to adjourn the commission at 4:29 p.m. And that concludes the August 8th, 2024 Planning Commission hearing. Our next meeting is tentatively scheduled for Thursday, August 15th, 2024. Thank you all for being here.